Our story begins with the appearance of a huge monster that was destroying a city and several people were fleeing for their lives. In addition to those people, our protagonist Ye Tian was also the one seeing the monster. He just managed to stand there staring at the monster before a kind of lightning bolt went through his arm and struck him, making him scream as a huge explosion of light happened. He suddenly woke up in bed, shocked by what he had just dreamt, but he thought he had just awakened his talent. He remembers the things he's seen so far and wonders if those hallucinations were caused by his awakening process. 100 years ago, countless space portals opened up on Earth, and ferocious dimensional beasts invaded the planet and threatened humanity's survival. But the dimensional energy also stimulated humanity's talents, and a small number of humans awakened their talents, which led humanity into the great age of talent. And of course our protagonist would also awaken his own talent in the future, but to find out what his ability is, you need to be subscribed to this channel so that you can receive more notifications of future Manuka summary videos. Ye Tian heard a voice asking him if he had finished and been able to awaken his talent, and just as expected, he had awakened his powers and ended up with a low-tier talent. Ye Tian was worried because it looked like he was screwed for the rest of his life because he couldn't become a martial artist with such a simple talent, and wondered how he could protect his sister in the future like this. Ye Tian's sister enters the room asking how his talent evaluation went, and Ye Tian replies that it was obviously excellent, making her happy, and he assures her that there was no need to worry because her brother would certainly become a super powerful martial artist. His sister celebrates and says that she made Ye Tian's favorite dish because she wanted to celebrate his awakening in this way, but even with his sister calling for him to go soon, the protagonist gets stuck in place when he suddenly sees his sister use status window before his eyes. The details said that you had a cultivation talent and a low-tier frozen talent that was still dormant, but suddenly when Ye Tian tried to touch the screen, it changed and the detail about the frozen talent disappeared. While Ye Tian was still confused, you pulled him by the wrist and told him to hurry because the food was getting cold, but the protagonist again saw another status window, this time saying that both the cultivation talent and the frozen one could be copied. The system asked if he would like to copy her talents, making him curious to discover that he could copy other people's talent, which meant that his situation was no longer a hopeless case. In the kitchen, Yu says she made Ye Tian's favorite dish, which was roast pork, and he thanks her. The two of them eat and Ye Tian continues to reflect on how copying talents was a miraculous ability, but he didn't want to test his ability on his sister, and that's why he chose no. After all, her base talent was better than his and her ice talent was extremely rare. Once Yu had awakened, she would certainly be able to dominate her opponent using her powers. Ye Tian thought of his parents and mentally told them that if they were seeing this now, they could rest in peace now. The protagonist went out and decided to start testing what he had just discovered, and then realized that the distance to be able to see other people's talents was only 3 meters away, which was a rather small distance. All the talents there were pretty bad, so Ye Tian was determined to copy a medium-tier talent at least. He should be able to take a look at the academy now that he's awakened a talent, even if it's a low-tier one, but copying someone else's talent could make his own talent change, so Ye Tian couldn't apply to an academy that requires the evaluation of talent. So he has a new idea and decides to go to the Linhai Academy's 5th base. Ye Tian thought that there should be several people with medium-tier talents in that academy, but as the first talent he had awakened, he would certainly be stronger than all of them in the future. 10 days later, at the Linhai base, the 5th Academy and the number 3 Martial Stadium, where a voice starts talking about how to become a warrior, they first had to become an apprentice, and to be an apprentice, they had to master physical training. So that man says that everyone would need to learn physical training from him. This would be considered a success if they managed to condense a cyclone in front of their chests, and the students agreed, including Ye Tian, who was taking part in the practice. On the way, one student faints and others become exhausted, but the teacher shouts at them to ignore those useless pieces of garbage because they will only become real warriors when they form a cyclone. Ye Tian became nervous because he couldn't condense anything and wondered if it was because his talent was too low. The teacher ended the day's training and shouted that they were the worst students he had ever had to teach. He says that they should all look up to Qing Dong as an example so that they can try harder and stop being so useless. At the end of the class, Ye Tian went out to talk to Zhang Bao, one of his classmates, and asked who this Qing Dong was, and Bao replied that he wasn't just anyone, as he had become a warrior after a fortnight and was now the dean's disciple, receiving personal training from him. Ye Tian says that his level must be very high indeed, and Bao shows him what looks like a signature from Dong himself. Bao says that when he becomes as powerful as the dean, he wonders how many months' rent that signature could be worth to sell. Suddenly, they find a crowd saying that the veteran Dong was coming, and he appears in the middle of the people where everyone is asking for autographs and wanting to talk to him. Even Bao runs out to ask Dong for autographs, and Ye Tian is excited to see Dong too. Dong thanks everyone for their support and compliments, while Ye Tian analyzes Dong and discovers that he has a medium-tier talent, so he approaches him to say hello, interested in his ability. Dong tells everyone to stay calm because he was there at the request of the teachers so that he could encourage everyone. everyone, and they should forget about the autographs because it could become a joke if their friends found out. Ye Tian asks if he could at least have a handshake, and Bao agrees that it would be really nice, so Dong shakes hands with Bao, the other students in the queue, and finally Ye Tian approaches to shake Dong's hand. Ye Tian manages to copy his talent successfully, and so, when he is alone later, he sees the system asking him if he would like to merge the medium-tier talent, and wonders if merging was a good or bad idea. Ye Tian remembers the dream he had, and although he's worried, he decides to try it out anyway and ends up using the skill, feeling deep pain. Ye Tian wondered what was going on and why fusing talents was so painful, but finally he managed to finish the fusion, and so he now had a medium-tier talent. Ye Tian was able to be reborn and changed his tier, which meant that the pain was worth it. The system warned him that the recharge time for the talent copier skill was 30 days, leaving him surprised that there was such a long time to be able to copy things from month to month. Ye Tian thought that was a really scary talent, so he decided he should try the physical training the teacher had taught him that day, and he started to become capable of creating a cyclone, realizing that having a medium-tier talent, physical training was super easy. Ye Tian realized that he was like an elite warrior now, and decided that he would become the best of warriors. A month later, several things have happened since then. Although Ye Tian had become an apprentice, he still had a long way to go to become a true warrior, and as Dong was receiving lessons from the dean himself, it was obvious that he would improve much faster than he did. But suddenly, as he was walking down the street, a monster attacked a civilian behind him, killing the father of a child before his eyes. Seeing a monster killing a person, the other people shouted for everyone to run, and Ye Tian was still surprised to see a monster in person for the first time. When the monster tries to attack the child, Ye Tian saves the child's life, but realizes that the monster is too fast and won't be able to escape in time. But suddenly a man with a sword appears and attacks the monster, sending it flying away. The man apologizes for being late, and Ye Tian asks who he is. The man replies that everyone calls him Captain Gale Wolf, and tells them to leave the Silver Moon Wolf in his hands while Ye Tian take care of protecting the girl. The protagonist agrees and sees Gale Wolf picking a fight with the wolf, and Ye Tian covers the girl's eyes, telling her not to see anything. Gale Wolf realizes that this monster was really strong, and that as expected of a Silver Moon Wolf, one shouldn't underestimate its speed, but he still had allies on his side to help him. Suddenly, other people appear to confront the wolf, but it runs away, causing everyone to run after it and attack it. They wonder if the wolf is dead, but Gale Wolf tells them that it would go into bloodthirsty mode and they should be careful. A man is sent away, and so is Gale Wolf. They realize that the wolf was trying to run away, but Gale Wolf replied that it was alright because that monster couldn't run away. After all, it was an archer who was waiting for him, and she fired an arrow in his direction, hitting him squarely and knocking him down. Gale Wolf said that it was too weak to withstand them and praised the excellent aim of the archer who dealt the final blow to the wolf. Ye Tian was surprised to see that he could now see the talents of the monster that was killed, as it had a low-tier blood talent and a beginner-level speed talent. The people who defeated the monster are relieved that it's all over because fast-type monsters were a pain to deal with and they should go out drinking now that they finished their work, but Gale Wolf shouts for everyone to be careful when the wolf suddenly gets up. He tells everyone to stand well back when the wolf roars loudly. They comment that monsters were really terrifying and mention that wolf's tenacity, and ask their captain what they should do now. Gale Wolf replied that they didn't need to worry about that because the wolf was very weak now and they could leave everything in its hands, and told Ye Tian that the area wasn't safe and that he should leave immediately and not just stand there. But the protagonist thought that this was a perfect opportunity and took off running, passing Gale Wolf and leaving him shocked when Ye Tian lunged at the wolf and hit him. But not only that, Ye Tian manages to successfully steal the monster's talent, and with that Ye Tian keeps hitting the monster with his bare hands while the system tells him several times that he was able to successfully steal the wolf's talent. But it wasn't long before Gale Wolf approached to tell him to stop because the wolf was already dead, leaving Ye Tian surprised that he had managed to kill the monster with his bare hands. Despite this, he was surprised that his ability to copy talent even worked on a monster like that wolf. Gale Wolf said that now they should clean up the mess and sent 3 of his men to take care of the bodies of the man and the wolf, and also told the archer to take care of the little girl. Gale Wolf then tells Ye Tian that he can't wait for him to join his squad in the future, and says that he should look for him when he has become a martial warrior. Ye Tian agrees with them and goes home to clean himself of all the blood, as his sister would certainly be worried if she saw this. Ye Tian is relieved to see that Yu is resting peacefully at home and thinks about how that day was the first time he saw a monster with his own eyes, and it was 100 times scarier than the monsters in the stories. But to protect his sister, he needed to become a martial warrior as soon as possible. He wondered if the monster's talent could fuse with a human's body, and although it was possibly more painful than the fusion of the previous talent, and there was also the possibility of putting his own life at risk, he still needed to get stronger to protect the people who were important to him. No matter what and no matter what the cost, Ye Tian intended to get stronger. Ye Tian starts with the speed talent, and just as expected, he feels a deep pain in his bones, and it seems as if they are breaking off piece by piece, and every limb of his body seems to be terribly aching. But not only that, he was suddenly shocked to realize that his legs had been broken and wondered if it was because the copy of the talent had failed, so he ended up losing consciousness. When Ye Tian wakes up again, he is shocked to realize that his legs are normal again, but not only that, but his body feels much lighter. A status window appears and says that his talent level was still average, but his speed talent was beginner level, making it clear that his copy was a real success. The scene cuts to the forest of the 5th Academy, where Ye Tian put his speed skill into practice by running through the forest, being amazed at how incredible the Silver Moon Wolf's speed really was. Doing the teacher's training, he thought his speed was comparable to that of a warrior now, but overall his skills were far from being truly powerful. Ye Tian considers that it would be good if he could speed up his cultivation. Then suddenly Bao appears, and he says that he was surprised that he couldn't find his friend at the academy. After all, he was secretly training in the forest. Bao touches Ye Tian and is shocked that he was as hard as stone with his training, and asks if he has already become an apprentice, and the protagonist agrees. Bao asks if he'd like to improve his powers faster, and Ye Tian asks if he knows a trick for that, and he asks back if he's ever drunk the blood of a ferocious beast before. The protagonist denies it, and Bao replies that to be honest, he improved faster than Ye Tian because he drank some, which leaves the protagonist shocked that the blood of a beast could actually do that. He's disappointed because there was a lot of Silver Moon Wolf blood that time before, and yet he didn't know it could be that important. Bao then says that there was a way to get fierce beast blood and asks if he'd like to try it. Ye Tian asks how he would do that, and so he finds out that the authorities at the seafront base have opened up a wilderness area outside the city for the 5th Academy to carry out tests, and the prize for that test was the blood of a ferocious beast. Ye Tian asks what the level of that wilderness was, and Bao replies that it's quite low because those ferocious beasts have been eradicated. Only one descendant of a ferocious beast remained, and it was a wild beast, which makes the protagonist excited to try. Bao gets excited and says that he could join his team so that they could defeat the ferocious beast together, which makes the protagonist stop to think about it. Bao asks what was wrong with that because he only said it because he was a good friend, and Ye Tian replies that he could join Bao at a later date and shouldn't worry about it. Bao is disappointed because he thought they were close enough to work together and didn't know he could be that cruel, but although the protagonist tries to leave, he tells him to wait for him because even though they're not on the same team, they could still be friends. Ye Tian thought that it was easy to stand out in a team, and if his talent ended up being exposed, it would be a great disaster, hence his decision to stay alone. He intended to take the blood of the ferocious beast and become a warrior, even if he had to do it completely alone. A month later, at the 5th Academy, the instructor asks Ye Tian why he went to sign up for the exam when he hadn't even received an invitation and asks if someone leaked the information, and the protagonist replies to the teacher that he had already become a martial artist and that meant he was qualified to sign up. The teacher commented that he wished these brats could at least live a little longer, but it seemed that all they wanted to do was die. He hands over a waiver of responsibility for his life and explains that if Ye Tian intended to take the exam, he should sign a waiver of responsibility for his own life. The teacher says that if he was afraid of dying, then he should leave and not waste his time, but Ye Tian laughs quietly. The teacher asks if they really thought that this exam was designed for brats like them and that they would surely regret it. The scene cuts to Ye Tian's house when he wakes up looking for her brother, is surprised to see food on the table and wonders if her brother was the one who did all this and if it was a special day. She is surprised to see a message on the table from her brother who would be away for an event lasting 3 days, hoping that he wouldn't be in danger after all this time away. At the same time, Ye Tian was with the other students taking part in the competition, and he was surprised that there were so many people there. Bao said that it was because they were all people who came from the 5 main academies, and soon a man appeared and approached them, seeing that they were from the 5th Academy, and asked if the trash from that horrible academy really dared to take the exam. Another man tells the first that he could hunt both beasts and other humans during the exam, so the more weaklings there are, the better, and he laughs because the weak should feel blessed to be hunted by the strongest. Bao tells him that that was Mo Xiaobei, one of the geniuses of the 1st Academy, and also the strongest of the younger generation of the Mo family. Ye Tian replied that it didn't surprise him that he was so arrogant. Suddenly, Xiaobei's companion asks who the man was who was approaching them and how he dared to go into the camp with his sword drawn, and the man who approached told Xiaobei to come closer because he intended to cut him to pieces. Xiaobei wondered if that man really intended to lose again, and it looked like a battle was about to begin. Ye Tian asks who that man was, and Bao replies that it was Li Yunqing, a genius swordsman from the 2nd Academy who was defeated in the past by Xiaobei. Xiaobei's companion says that they were all really blind for thinking that Yunqing could win, but the protagonist decides to start cheering for Yunqing out of the blue, leaving Yunqing himself confused and wondering why Ye Tian was cheering for him and if he wasn't afraid of Xiaobei at all because it was a bit embarrassing. Suddenly, a voice from the loudspeaker said that fights weren't allowed outside the wild zone and aggressors would be disqualified from the test, prompting Yunqing to say that he'd let Xiaobei live for now, but when they were in the wild zone, he'd find a way to wipe him out. Xiaobei laughs because he seemed seemed like an undisciplined person, and then Yinqing approaches Ye Tian to ask his name after he had the courage to cheer for him. Ye Tian introduces himself, and Yinqing is surprised that he has a cool name. And then, the competition begins, so Bao says that he would need to find his team so that he can meet Ye Tian again later, and wishes him good luck. The first academy would start first, then those from the second academy, and so those from the fifth academy would be the last to go. Yinqing wished Ye Tian good luck and left, and so the protagonist set off on his journey to get through the competition. Ye Tian found a place that should be hidden enough, and now that Ye Tian had been able to steal the fencing ability, he began to make the fusion. Although it always hurt a lot, the protagonist was starting to get used to it because he had been through it twice, and it was also that he could get stronger. Now, Ye Tian could use his fencing skills, and his status now indicated that his swordsmanship was of medium level too. All four academies entered the wilderness area, and finally the fifth academy began to enter as well. Entering the wilderness area, Ye Tian soon came across a large snake monster that he had to face using his sword, killing it quickly with his swordplay. He easily got a free point, and it was indeed a wild beast that appeared to be quite weak, but according to the rules of the test, the more wild beasts they killed, the higher their rank. He wondered how many points it would take to be able to take first place, and apparently it was written that it took 3 times the blood of a medium-level feral beast and 100,000 yuan. There was still a long way to go, but in any case he intended to keep working to hunt down more wild beasts. Suddenly, Ye Tian heard a cry for help, and as he approached, he realized that the person asking for help was Bao, who was begging not to die. After all, he hadn't even found a wife yet. Bao was being attacked by a wolf, so Ye Tian intervened by shooting an arrow at the wolf to save his life. The protagonist approaches him and asks if he could give up the points to him, but Bao says he should run away because he would be no match for the wolves all at once. But Ye Tian continues to face the wolves anyway, using his talent for speed as well as his talent for fencing, leaving Bao amazed at how powerful Ye Tian has become. Ye Tian asks if it was alright to take the wolf's teeth, and Bao agrees that they were all his. The protagonist asks if he really intended to continue in that finished state, and Bao replies that he was ready to give up the competition now. The test this time was too dangerous, and he should be content just because he had managed to stay alive for so long. All his teammates were injured, so he needed to get out and get them out quickly, and at least one of them should stay alive. Ye Tian replied that it seemed to be the only way, but Bao asked his friend to wait because there was a fake ferocious beast living in the forest and he should be careful. The level of danger among the monsters started with a ferocious beast, moved on to a false one, and finally to a wild beast, which meant that it was the second level of monster danger in that region. Bao says that he heard that the guys from the first academy were teaming up against a striped snake that was over 10 meters long, and rumor has it that it was on the level of a fake ferocious beast. Bao tells him that it was worth 500 points, leaving Ye Tian surprised and asking in which direction it was now, and Bao points out that it was to the southeast. The protagonist sets off quickly in that direction, determined to get those 500 points and kill him so that he can take first place, prompting Bao to tell him to be careful. The protagonist runs in that direction and stops walking when he finds several bodies scattered on the ground, and he recognizes that it was the uniform of the first academy. Ye Tian realized that there was a battle raging ahead and set off in that direction, soon encountering what appeared to be the fake ferocious beast. Xiao Bei guides the other warriors and tells them all to take the beast because they need to kill it, and they really want to get the 500 points. One warrior tells them that the fake ferocious beast was starting to lose its stamina and they should end things now or never. Xiao Bei lunges at the monster and tells it to leave everything in his hands, and his sword hits the monster square in the head, but it soon ends up being sent too far with one move. But Xiao Bei was happy that the 500 points would be his, and the monster falls to the ground. Ye Tian was frustrated because he was too late, and when Xiao Bei returned to the dead monster, the other warriors praised him for getting the 500 points. Xiao Bei was very pleased to be in first place in the challenge, but to everyone's surprise, the monster awakens in rage mode with a visible bloodlust to kill everyone around it, which leaves Xiao Bei frustrated. This makes them all realize that this wasn't a fake angry beast, but a real ferocious beast, which makes the warriors nervous about chasing the monster in that state, but Xiao Bei agrees that they need to go after it because it was the kind of monster that would be worth 1,000 points. They decide to hurry because they would end up giving an advantage to other participants if they didn't chase the monster right now. Xiao Bei thinks that the monster has become very weak after its attacks, and so they couldn't let anyone come across it now, or all their efforts would be in vain. Ye Tian never thought that a ferocious beast could be worth 1,000 points before, and says that it was a pity because he was certainly much faster than those warriors, and so using his speed talent at full power, he quickly shoots ahead of everyone. Ye Tian realizes that the people from the first academy haven't arrived yet, and he could use this time to find the monster. He notices the mucus secreted by the striped snake left behind and realizes that it must have been hiding nearby, which makes him happy because then the 1,000 points would be all his. Ye Tian could smell the stench of the viper quite intensely, and it seemed that it must be somewhere near there. Ye Tian soon found it and realized that it was trying to drink something. After all, it shouldn't be normal water, but he decides to put that aside side because he needs to get his 1000 points first of all, and so he sets off to attack his opponent, but the snake quickly realizes him, surprising him because in fact the monster was strangely faster than it looked. Ye Tian is sent flying by the counterattack, but the battle against the snake continues and he manages to pierce its eyes, giving him time to attack the monster again with his sword and tear its body apart. Finally, the snake falls to the ground after receiving such an impact, and the protagonist sighs, realizing that monsters were very strong indeed, and he would never have been able to kill it if Xiaobei's group hadn't weakened it beforehand. Ye Tian approaches the snake wondering what liquid it was drinking earlier, but he realizes that it shouldn't matter what it is. If a monster was after it, it must mean that it was some kind of treasure, so he decides to take some first and worry about it later. Ye Tian also decided to take the snake's eye because it would serve as proof of its death, and it seemed that the blood from a monster's heart was really valuable. He also managed to take some of that strange liquid, even though he had no idea what it could be. But whatever it was, he couldn't allow Xiaobei to get his hands on those things. The points he'd gotten so far were more than enough to put himself in first place, so it was time for him to leave that space. When Ye Tian left, later Xiaobei and his group arrived, surprised because their eyes had been taken and their hearts were also full of blood. The only thing left inside was the cadaver, and they asked Yunqing what they should do, but Yunqing was furious, wondering who dared to steal his 100-point trophy, promising that he would destroy this thief. Ye Tian was watching the whole discussion, and when the warriors arrived, the warriors told Yunqing that the person who had stolen his points had probably gone into hiding and asked what they should do now. Yunqing says that they should investigate everyone who might have seen the thief because they would never allow him to escape so easily. The warriors agreed with their master's orders, and Ye Tian realized that he would have to hide for a while longer. He quickly ran away, knowing that eventually everyone would discover him. After all, when Ye Tian handed in the parts he had collected for the points calculation at the end of the test in 3 days' time, everyone would know that he was responsible for killing that monster. So he needed to use the remaining time to be able to focus on cultivation and quickly improve his strength by finding a place to hide. The protagonist wondered how much more powerful he could become if he drank that monster's blood, and as he drank it, Ye Tian realized that it had to be the most disgusting thing he had ever tasted. Still, it was a small price to pay to become stronger and protect his sister. So he drinks the liquid completely, and in parallel Yu even sneezes, wondering who it was that was talking about her all of a sudden. Returning to the protagonist, he realizes that a great change has begun to take place in his body. Ye Tian realized that he was increasing his powers and cultivation speed by almost 4 times, and it was no wonder that Dong and the others were getting so strong so quickly. It seemed that in addition to their own talents, they also needed the help of external substances to be able to reach that great level of power, which was good because then they could stop to cultivate as much as possible during the remaining 2.5 days. So, 3 days later, the warriors were handing over the collected points and marking everything that had been collected. Yunqing also arrived and asked the teacher to calculate the points he had collected, so he got 195 points, leaving the other students surprised. Soon Xiaobei also arrives, who comments that 195 points is no big deal and asks how they could be so surprised. Xiaobei says that he really overestimated Yunqing and asks if he really thought he was so qualified to challenge him when he didn't even get 200 points. Xiaobei asks the teacher to calculate his points now and shockingly announces that he got 427 points, leaving the others surprised because the difference between them was gigantic. Yunqing accuses Xiaobei of having stolen points from other people, and he laughs, replying that he only stole with his own skills if that was the case. Some girls congratulate Xiaobei because surely first place was entirely Xiaobei's in that case, but Xiaobei replies that first place should surely get over 1,000 points, leaving everyone surprised and wondering how that could be possible. They speculate that all the living students should have appeared at this point in the championship, and the teacher agrees because anyone else who hasn't yet appeared should possibly have died, which should make Xiaobei in first place to stay in the test. But soon Ye Tian arrives too and hands over the points analysis to the teacher, realizing that they were the eyes of a monster. He asks what his total points were and she replies that he got 1,163 points, congratulating him on getting first place in the practical test, and the rewards would be 3 bottles of monster blood and 100,000 yuan in cash. Bao congratulates Ye Tian on winning first place, which leaves Yunqing surprised and wondering how he managed to achieve something like that. Xiaobei realizes that the thief has finally shown up and is curious to realize that it was one of the delinquents from the 5th Academy. Xiaobei orders an investigation so that they can find out everything there is to know about Ye Tian, and meanwhile Bao says that his friend Ye Tian has really done something impressive. Now their 5th Academy could go so far as to come first, taking the practical test and their victory home. The girls agree that it was impressive because they hadn't even imagined that something like this could really happen, and ask how he managed it. The teacher complains that Ye Tian was an arrogant brat, and Bao also asks the teacher why he didn't seem so happy when Ye Tian managed to bring glory to the 5th Academy. The teacher replied that he had offended and angered a powerful family like the Mo's, and feared that Ye Tian might soon die a sudden death. death. So the ranking table from the practical test that time is on display for everyone to see, and they also take the opportunity to photograph everyone who passed the test. They congratulate everyone again, especially the 3 who came first and were able to receive their prizes. Xiaobei says that Ye Tian must have had a lot of guts to dare steal something like that from him, and the protagonist agrees and says that he could say the same about Xiaobei too. Yuxing asked if Xiaobei could at least remember what he had said to him a little while earlier too, because just like Xiaobei, Ye Tian stole points using his own skill, and there should certainly be no problem with that. Xiaobei asks who Yuxing thought was stronger between him and Ye Tian, and Yuxing suggests that they could find out during the battle itself, and Ye Tian agrees because if Xiaobei had the time, he might be happy to carry out his request. Xiaobei was very interested in this, and Ye Tian thought that when you became the target of a person like Xiaobei, there was no escape. The only way out now was to become so powerful that he couldn't dare challenge him again. Ye Tian returns home and Yu runs to hug him when she sees him, asking what took him so long and where he was all this time. She assures him that he hasn't been hurt and checks his body, and the protagonist replies that he was perfectly fine, but was able to bring gifts for you, which makes her very happy. She is surprised that he has brought too much money home, seeming to have enough money for Ye Tian to get married. He is confused by her comment, and explains that this money was all used so that she can use it for her tuition and living costs, and she is surprised. She's also happy because it means they can eat meat every day from now on. Yu asks what that strange liquid was that he also brought, and Ye Tian replies that he didn't know either, so he ended up bringing a book with pictures of treasures so he could find out what it was. Yu said he wanted to see it with him too, and the protagonist was shocked to discover that it was the elixir of the Earth's core, a very rare treasure. The elixir was a liquid essence formed from earth stones after absorbing the primordial chi of the heavens and earth for thousands of years. The elixir could improve cultivation talents when consumed, but it was only effective on talents of intermediate rank downwards. In addition, there was a small chance that the mordile earth stone, which also improves cultivation talents from a high rank to a low one, might exist near where the elixir was being produced. Ye Tian thinks that that monster snake from before should have been able to become such a monster using the earth core elixir, and is surprised by this because he never imagined that he would collect such a powerful item so easily. Yu hands the elixir to Ye Tian and says that since this thing could improve talents, it will definitely help them, but the protagonist replies that he doesn't need it anymore, but would instead make Yu even stronger with it, and suggests that she drink it. Yu is shocked by her brother's words. After all, she hasn't even been able to awaken to have the chance to drink something like this, and wonders if it wouldn't be a waste to drink it. But Yu's status window said that she now had a second-class cultivation talent and a novice-levelized talent that was still dormant. Ye Tian thought that since her talent was at second class, if she drank the earth core elixir, it would certainly improve, but they didn't know how much yet. Yu suggests that they could sell the elixir to get a lot of money by selling something that powerful. In the book it says that there is something more powerful called the earth stone where the earth core elixir originated, but Ye Tian had destroyed the place. When the buyer asked about the earth stones, he could only say that there weren't any, but he certainly wouldn't believe him, so everything would lead to murder. Yu asks why Ye Tian had destroyed the stone and says that it was a real shame that it had happened, and he replies that if she doesn't drink the elixir it would be even more of a real shame. So Ye Tian forces his sister to drink the elixir even though she complains all the time about everything, and she even chokes despite commenting that the temperature of the elixir was strangely warm and had interesting effects. Ye Tian wondered what was going on and why her cultivation talent was still second-rate, and if the book was wrong. Yu said she was a bit tired and would cook for Ye Tian when she woke up, and he agreed, replying that he could go ahead and rest. The protagonist continues to wonder what the problem was and why nothing happened, but he could still wait a little longer because it could be that the drug hasn't had any effect on his body yet. An hour later, Ye Tian suddenly realized that her talent wave was extraordinarily strong, and now her cultivation talent had reached the medium level, rising 2 levels. A medium talent cultivation plus a rare ice talent was something that could only prove that Yu would become a high-level warrior in the future. Ye Tian thought he really couldn't lose to Xiaobei and decided to drink the beast's blood, complaining that it tasted even worse than the elixir before. But apart from that, Ye Tian could now also eat what he had wanted to eat since he was in the cave. He wondered how much he could improve with the blood of a mid-level furious beast, and decided to try it using physical training practice as well. Ye Tian was shocked to realize that he had managed to improve 8 times as much, and it seemed that the effects of the blood of a mid-level furious beast were terrible, and if he could have enough blood, he would be able to conquer the warrior level within a month. It was a shame because he only had 2 more bottles of that, and he wondered what he should do. The scene cut to the 5th Academy in the woods 10 days later, where Ye Tian continued to train his skills to the maximum. Suddenly, Bao rushes in desperately, leaving the protagonist confused by the shouting, and Bao mentions Xiaobei's name, making Ye Tian think he was there. But Bao denies it and says that he left to pursue his warrior level and was certainly saying that he was harboring evil intentions now, and was surely just hoping to become a warrior before going after Ye Tian for revenge. Bao was outraged that Ye Tian was still sitting there super calm as if it was no big deal, and the protagonist replied that he had thought that Xiaobei had shown up to challenge him, but instead he seemed to have stepped away to take a leave of absence. The protagonist thinks he's had a good look at Xiaobei and his talent was also at medium level, and to reach warrior level he'd need about a month. Bao says that if Xiaobei really does become a warrior, dealing with Ye Tian would be like stepping on ants, and the protagonist replies that he has also been training a lot and so it wasn't as if he was relaxing. Bao insists on the subject because Xiaobei was a disciple with a great track record and plenty of resources, while Ye Tian only had those 3 bottles of mid-level beast blood, and surely they should be running out by now. The protagonist agrees that the blood has run out, and Bao replies that as a good friend, he will take care of what's left of Ye Tian's body after Xiaobei has finished with him, and also of his sister. The protagonist thought he only had the low-level blood of the striped snake and the blood of the heart left, and when he used them, he thought he would reach the highest level of the apprentice level. It might be a step away from the warrior, but it was impossible to achieve it, but with the talent of speed and the talent of his fencing, he could certainly become capable of facing someone who was a warrior. Meanwhile, in the Mo family, Xiaobei has just become warrior level, becoming even more powerful than before. Xiaobei's father shows up to see him and realizes that he has finally managed to become a warrior, making him very proud because he really was like his son at heart. Mon, Xiaobei's father, was the foundation of the Mo family's wealth and one of the 10 elders of the Middle Elite Warrior Level Elders Association, and said that his son was doing well, and Xiaobei assured his father that he would never bring shame on his family, and says that this was a fact and that the elder even told him to reward him personally, and it was all thanks to him and the help of the elders, and tells a subordinate to look at the dishes that have been prepared in the kitchen, but Xiaobei says that he could see for himself, and tells his son to take care to eat later because he will prepare his favorite foods to celebrate, and Xiaobei thanks his father for that. When the father leaves, Xiaobei asks the subordinate if he carefully investigated the thing he left in his hands before being isolated, and the subordinate agrees because Ye Tian had no parents and no one to rely on, so they could bully him all they wanted. Xiaobei says that Ye Tian was a piece of trash with no track record, even though he thought that at least he could have had someone powerful backing him up all this time, and if that was the case, then they just needed to get someone to kill him. The subordinate says that the base was different from the jungle, and if you just kill as you please, no matter how powerful the family was, there would still be big problems as a result. Xiaobei asks him again who he let use the Mo family name to kill. After all, they could only go out to look for a shadow killer, perhaps a special shadow killer. The subordinate replies that to hire a shadow assassin, they would need at least $1 million, and asks if spending that much just to get rid of a ridiculous kid would be worth it, and Xiaobei angrily replies that he really was a poor servant as he must think like a poor person to worry so much about money to that extent. Xiaobei says that the seafront base was so vast and yet only a few families could manage to prosper while others became slaves, and it was all because when they discovered a genius among the poor they killed him immediately. The subordinate realizes that the 5th Academy doesn't exist to cultivate talent, but to conquer the weak, and that's how the world works. Back in the woods of the 5th Academy, Ye Tian was training his powers to the maximum before deciding to return home in the rain. On the way, a system window suddenly appears on top of a lamppost and he is confused to know what was going on and what it was, and realizes that it was written inside the window that it belonged to a human called Li Cun, with a second-class cultivation talent and a beginner-level shadow talent. Cun attacks the protagonist and he quickly protects himself from the attack, asking who it was that was trying to attack him so suddenly, and Cun replies that it was someone who had come for his life just now. Ye Tian wonders if it was an assassin hired by Xiaobei, and wonders what was going on, because if Xiaobei has become a martial warrior, he could easily go and fight him, and he wonders why he has to resort to such a dishonest method, but Cun just keeps going at Ye Tian without a second thought. Thus began a battle between the two, and the protagonist was always surprised because Cun had the ability to disappear and appear from the shadows, and it seemed that his shadow talent was the kind that could make him invisible. Despite this, Cun was also surprised that a mere martial arts apprentice was strangely fast enough to dodge his attack, and Ye Tian was ready to attack the assassin. Although they were both managing to deal with each other well, Ye Tian always ended up having problems because Cun was always invisible, and it was the kind of power that would be very difficult for an ordinary person to deal with, but against him it was completely useless. And so Ye Tian took down his opponent after some time, leaving the assassin stunned because it seemed impossible, as even an elite warrior wouldn't be able to see through his talent. Cun asks how he was able to do something like that, and Ye Tian replies that if he really wanted to know the truth, he should first answer his question of who it was that sent him to kill him. Cun laughs and says he'll only answer when he's on his last breath, and so the two start fighting again, only for Ye Tian to trap Cun again with his skills, asking again who had sent him after him. Cun laughs, saying that he was the strongest martial apprentice he had ever met in his life, and congratulates him on it. Cun finally decides to tell the truth and reveals that it was Mo Xiaobei who sent him, which infuriates infiltrates Ye Tian. The protagonist then touches Cun's body and successfully steals his shadow talent, now also acquiring his new novice rank shadow talent in his status window. After leaving Cun's body behind in the rain, he thinks that humans shouldn't be like fallen leaves, left to the mercy of the wind and rain. And so Ye Tian intended to live his life the way a man should, and in a world like this, he would be like the wind and the rain, and never like a fallen leaf. Ye Tian returned home to rest, taking all of Cun's belongings with him. He was carrying two swords that were probably primordial weapons, and as Ye Tian's sword had been completely ruined, the ones he was using were practically untouched. In addition, he found a gold card with 1 million on it, a white card with 100,000 on it, and all this gave a total of 3.5 million. Ye Tian laughs and says that he would make good use of the money Xiao Bei spent to take his life, but he also ends up finding a strange book called Shadow Blades. The protagonist is surprised because this was a bronze level knife technique, which was a good thing. Blade techniques could unlock the full power of someone's blade talent, and that was exactly what he needed. Ye Tian decides that he could learn and test right now and starts reading, but suddenly he remembers and wonders why his sister Yu hasn't come back yet. When Xiao Bei sent someone to kill him, he must have known everything about his life and family, which worried him about what might have happened to Yu because there was a great chance that she had been murdered too. Ye Tian rushed out, hoping that Yu was alright, to the city center, an ordinary high school. He looked around for his sister, thinking that this was just an ordinary school and people with talents couldn't just show up and kill students without a second thought. Still, Ye Tian wonders how Xiao Bei would respect and follow such a basic rule of martial warriors, and suddenly he senses a powerful presence nearby and tells her not to move, threatening her. But suddenly Yu reveals that this presence was herself, leaving Ye Tian confused and asking what she was doing and why it took her so long, and she replies that she was on duty that day and cleaning the rooms. Yu asks what happened to his brother and why he didn't bring an umbrella or put on shoes because he was totally wet, and Ye Tian replies nervously that he just forgot because he was in a hurry, and she says that anyway, she wanted to know how he made that cool move so quickly before because she was curious. But still, the one who was watching the whole conversation was Xiao Bei himself, who wondered why Ye Tian was still alive until now. The brothers go out to buy something to eat and Yu picks up some sausages to eat on the way home. Ye Tian then asks her what she would like to eat that night because she was going to cook, and she replies that they could go with their trademark, which was slices of boiled meat. On the way back, the protagonist realized that they were being followed by someone along the way, even though they didn't know who it was that was following them. When they got home, Yu helped them get dinner ready and told him to help her set the table now so they could eat, and Ye Tian agreed that he was going to help her even when he saw that there was a strange car outside the house. The next day, Yu went to class as normal and was a model student in front of all her classmates, and Ye Tian was keeping a close eye on the whole process. It's been 3 days in a row since that same car kept passing by them, but even more specifically it was following Yu. Ye Tian says that daring to hurt even his little sister was something that would surely have made them lose the thread completely at once, but to his surprise the car that was parked starts to leave the parking lot. So the protagonist decides to follow him through the city until the car stops at a building, and he wonders if this was the meeting place they had arranged. At the site, Xiao Bei's subordinates were beating a man with their fists even though he was shouting that he had no more money to give them, claiming that he had sworn to pay them as soon as he got enough money and begging them to leave. Xiao Bei replied that if he couldn't pay now, it would be double the next day. After all, money didn't grow on trees. The man replies that Xiao Bei's interest was very high and he really couldn't pay today as he had elderly parents and a small child to look after, and asks again so that he can leave just in time when the subordinate who was driving Xiao Bei's car arrives to talk to them. Xiao Bei asks if he's had any news of the shadow killer, and the subordinate replies that he hasn't been able to contact the shadow killer and would try to contact him again through someone else. Ye Tian realizes, observing using his shadow ability, that the assassin was indeed sent by Xiao Bei. Xiao Bei says that it could be that some people think that descendants of wealthy families like him are easy to trick, which wasn't the case. He then begins to beat the man in front of his eyes with his own body. The subordinate replies that he would never dare to do anything like that and that he would serve him faithfully and that he never even dared to think about that kind of thing, and another subordinate says that the man who was beaten was killed by Xiao Bei's hands. Xiao Bei told him to get rid of him and asked what they would do with Ye Tian's sister, and the subordinate replied that he was planning to entrust it to a friend who had just got out of jail, but now it seemed that leaving things to others might be a mistake. That's why he intended to take care of the problem himself first and Xiao Bei wouldn't have to worry about any of it. But Xiao Bei attacks his subordinate, leaving him confused by his actions, and Xiao Bei explains that this was the punishment for not doing his job properly. He picks up a primordial weapon to attack his subordinate just in time for Ye Tian to appear and jump on Xiao Bei. In the process, they exchanged quick blows and Ye Tian even ended up getting a scratch on the face, and now it looked like the great battle between the two warriors was about to begin. Our story continues after Xiao Bei receives a full blow from the protagonist, causing all his subordinates to scream in shock because their master has been killed. They realized that he was using a shadow talent that hid his body body and identity, wondering if the one who attacked him was Cun, the hired assassin. But when they recognize Ye Tian, they are impressed and confused, wondering how he managed to acquire the shadow talent like that. The subordinate says that he investigated Ye Tian and that he was just an underachiever with a bit of talent, and wonders how he was able to kill Xiaobei with just one move like that. He asks where Li Cun was and to answer his questions immediately, but the protagonist just takes a deep breath and goes off to attack the subordinate. The subordinate shouts that he can't kill him, but Ye Tian cuts him off perfectly even after hearing his words, not caring a bit. As soon as he had finished them all off in one go, Ye Tian realized that he wasn't someone who simply waited for the slaughter like a sheep, and it was a shame that they had messed with the wrong target in the first place. After this impressive scene, our protagonist leaves, but first of all you need to be subscribed to this channel so that you can receive new notifications when summary videos come out. So hit the subscribe button quickly and let's get on with the video. An hour later, En, Xiaobei's father, shows up to see the death scene, furious and wondering who killed his son. A subordinate tells him that they found something at the scene, and says that the killer was probably a shadow killer because he left behind a handkerchief with shadow written on it, which makes En furious because that was really inhumane. Who appeared soon after En was the great elder Mo, or Mo Zhangqing, the great elder of the wealthy Mo family from the sea base, the only great warrior in the Mo family. Among the ranks of the warriors, he started at the base as an apprentice, progressed to warrior, elite warrior, great warrior, grandmaster, and so on. This meant that Mo Qing was a great warrior and a very powerful person, and En and the others felt his pressure. En told Qing that his son was dead, and now the family prodigy was gone. Qing replied that he knew and told him to stand up and speak properly, and said that Xiaobei had just reached the level of warrior and had barely finished his celebratory banquet. He had great potential to become a great warrior and revitalize the entire Mo family, and says that despite this, Xiaobei had a very miserable end, and Qing agrees that he really was the Mo family's hope for the next generation, and if the family produced a second great warrior, his family's position in the sea base would be greatly increased. En replies that Xiaobei's death cannot be in vain and begs Qing to avenge Xiaobei. Qing reflects on the shadow assassin and says that it was definitely that family who should have had a grudge against them, and it was certainly they who hired a shadow assassin to kill Xiaobei. On the handkerchief that was left behind, Qing saw the symbol of the iron tooth and immediately recognized where that handkerchief belonged. The other day, Ye Tian began to hear from Bao about the iron tooth base, which was much stronger than their sea base. The elders of the Mo family were suspecting that some families in the sea base were secretly working with the iron tooth base to kill the prodigies of the younger generation and swallow up the sea base. The rumors say that Xiaobei had just reached warrior level and ended up being killed by them, and Bao even mentions that they had supposedly beheaded him, and Ye Tian is relieved because it seemed that no one knew that he was responsible for it. Bao says that the first person Xiaobei would go after reaching the warrior level would certainly be Ye Tian, but that someone had gotten rid of him earlier was very lucky. The truth was that Ye Tian had left the handkerchief with the word shadow behind on purpose to throw off the Mo family, but Qing ended up discovering the symbol of the iron base on it, which made him worry about whether he had revealed the conspiracy of the iron tooth base by accident, or whether Qing was just making up stories so that he could heat things up between the two bases on purpose. The next day, at 4 in the morning, the protagonist woke up and got ready to go out, but soon Yu woke up too when he heard Ye Tian, and he wondered if he had woken her up by accident. Yu asks where he's going at this time of the morning, and Ye Tian replies that he's going out on his own so that he can train and improve his powers. She comments that he hardly said he had time to get back because it had only been a few days since he'd returned home and he'd soon be leaving to be alone again, and she asks if he couldn't stop going or at least go out with some friends. Ye Tian replies that she doesn't need to wait for him at home, but Yu runs after him and hugs him from behind, telling him to come back safely and soon. The protagonist finally set off for a place where he had heard there were advanced level ferocious beasts, but with his current powers, he could only secretly hunt for low-level beasts abroad. He couldn't attract the attention of those advanced level ferocious beasts. But this time, it was Ye Tian's turn to reach warrior level 2, and he would start training there. Suddenly, the protagonist felt what sounded like an earthquake, but then realized that it wasn't an earthquake at all, but the approach of a ferocious beast. That ferocious beast was a weak-blooded iron cow with second-rate defensive talent, and Ye Tian is surprised that even after such a long distance, it was still able to spot him like that. So Ye Tian went after the ferocious beast too, starting his battle against it using his swords, being surprised by the monster's powerful defense. He was sent flying backwards by the beast's scream, and thus realized that the talent of that ferocious beast wasn't so bad, but he wanted that talent more than ever, and would be fighting for it. Ye Tian went after the ferocious beast again, thinking that no matter what kind of creature it was, its weak point would always be in that particular place, which in this case was its eyes. But Ye Tian was surprised surprised because his swords couldn't destroy the beast's eyes and were stopped by its great defense to the point where his swords began to crack. Even though it was a second-rate defensive talent, it was still very strong. It didn't take long for one of his swords to break against the barrier and Ye Tian received a full blow from the beast, flying away. He recognized that it really was a powerful talent, but he still wanted it badly. But it was a pity because the countdown for recharging copying talents still needed another 16 days. That iron-armored cow must have been weaker than the Silver Moon Wolf, but still stronger than that violent scale snake he had faced in the past. Still, its size was large and he only needed to find a weak spot and attack it stealthily to stand a chance of winning. He activated his shadow talent and charged at the ferocious beast for the third time, knowing that his talent was so useful that his target didn't even notice the attack that was coming at him, but not even his sword talent was effective against its great defense, so he needed to find its weak point. The defensive talent didn't have any openings, which was a big problem, but he soon realized that he had a much weaker defensive point than the others, which was on the beast's back. And so when he tried to attack it at that point, the monster felt the attack for sure, falling to the ground and leaving the protagonist satisfied because it seemed that his hunch had been correct. Ye Tian also discovered that his blade could only pass through him once he was dead, because regardless of the strength of his talent, it would mean nothing if he died. The ox skin must have been very valuable, as well as his eyes and testicles, and Ye Tian decided to take all the items so that he could sell them. But the most valuable item of all would surely be his horn, so the protagonist kept everything to take back from his trip. He also needed to find a quiet place to start cultivating. So, the protagonist finds a place inside a cave and sits down to start cultivating so that he can cross over into the realm of the martial warrior, then feeds on the fresh blood and peanuts of the sister brand so that he can begin his cultivation exercise. 20 days later, Ye Tian began to evolve his powers even more than before, causing a huge explosion of power. And the ones who were around to see it were two women, one of whom mentioned that it was impressive that there was someone crossing over into the martial warrior realm in such a deserted place, which was especially interesting given that immense flow of power. Finally, Ye Tian has successfully reached the martial warrior realm and realizes that 20 days have passed since then, and the recharge time for stealing talents should be over too. First, he decides to copy the defensive talent, but a status window pops up saying that his target status was incomplete and the copying couldn't continue, and he had to select a target in order to copy it successfully. The protagonist wonders if there really was such a limitation, but if he had known about it from the start, he wouldn't have cut the beast to pieces like that. The girls realized that it was Ye Tian who killed that monster because he had just crossed over into the martial warrior realm, but that monster seemed to have been dead for much longer, which didn't make sense because when the monster died, he was still only a martial apprentice and it should have been impossible for him to have killed that monster. Even though he was just a martial apprentice, he had dared to explore that mountain. In fact, Ye Tian had been in the mountains for more than 20 days and needed to take a shower before returning home in that terrible way. The girls were shocked that out of nowhere he started taking off his clothes and looked like he was about to do something indecent and decided to leave once and for all. Ye Tian enters the water to take a bath and the scene cuts to the martial market at Linhai Base, where the biggest store in the whole market seemed to be located. The protagonist decides to go in and check out the shopping pavilion, but the two girls who pass him in the market recognize him, but the protagonist also recognizes one of the girls as his sister Yu. The girl is confused as to why Ye Tian was calling her that, and he realizes that he must only be confusing things because Yu would never appear in that place, but the truth was that the girl who looked like his sister was a great prodigy. That girl was Yu Ling, a warrior with a high rank cultivation talent, with a medium rank in the sword talent and a novice rank in the speed talent. The girl next to Ling asked why he was calling Ling his sister because he didn't seem to have the balls for someone who was a mere beggar, which left the protagonist confused by the way she was talking about him. The protagonist remembers that he bathed properly and wonders if he still stinks to be called that, but Ling tells her companion, Xiao Yu, not to say such nonsense. Ling mutters something for Xiao to say to the protagonist, and she apologizes to the warrior for having offended him because his mistress had taught him a proper lesson and asks him to forgive her for her earlier words. But Ye Tian just remained confused from start to finish with the interaction, and Xiao said that Ling was going out to do something and would be back soon. Xiao says that Ye Tian went to the martial pavilion certainly to sell materials, and in fact Ling was the supervisor of the commercial pavilion. Xiao was wrong about what he said a while ago, and to compensate him for the offense, no matter what he sold, they would pay double the price. This perplexes him and Xiao invites him into the pavilion, and when they enter, Ye Tian is impressed because the items on sale are really great, which should be expected from the biggest store in the martial market. The attendant tells Ye Tian to drink some tea and offers to make him more comfortable. The protagonist also showed him all the items he wanted to be able to sell and replied that this amounted to a total total of $200,000, but as they were paying twice as much, he would receive $400,000, which made Ye Tian spit out his shot tea. And of course Ye Tian agrees to the proposal because getting the money was much easier than he imagined. Xiao hands him the 4 white cards and explains that each one had 100,000 inside, and tells him to be very careful with them, and Ye Tian thanks him. He thinks that if you saw so much money, he would be very happy, so Xiao says that Ling also mentioned earlier that in order to make up for his previous actions, if he wanted to buy something in the pavilion, everything would be half price. It was obvious that Ye Tian accepted the offer without a second thought, but he still saw that the items were all too expensive. No wonder martial artist cultivation had become the exclusive preserve of large wealthy families, and it seemed almost impossible for ordinary people to afford items of that value. For now, Ye Tian would start by buying a Yuan Energy Forging Body Technique book, a Furious Beast Atlas book, 3 bottles of medium-rank Furious Beast blood, and 3 bottles of Qing Yuan solution. Xiao agreed and went out to get the items that Ye Tian wanted to buy, and with the discount he would only have to pay $785, and to round off the purchase he could only pay $700,000. Ye Tian handed over a gold card with $1 million on it, which made him feel relieved because he had gotten a huge amount of money from the CUN assassin and could now use it to buy things without too much trouble. Xiao returned the change to Ye Tian and told him to keep everything safe again. The protagonist thinks that such a large martial pavilion offering to give him so many benefits certainly wasn't just to make up for the previous offense. After all, he was just a poor guy, and so he was quite confused as to what exactly they saw in him to give him so many benefits. Ye Tian decides to leave, but then Xiao asks him to wait, something the protagonist was expecting from the start because obviously the shopping wasn't going to be that easy and simple. Xiao told him that the supervisor of the shopping center wanted to meet him and asked if he was available for the occasion, and Ye Tian agreed, telling her to show him the way. Xiao led Ye Tian to where Ling was, but he was always surprised at how similar Ling was to his sister Yu. So Ling introduces herself to the protagonist and the two shake hands in greeting, and Ye Tian in an instant copies her high-rank cultivation talent, also introducing himself to her. Ling asks him to sit down and tells him that all those who set foot on the second floor of the martial pavilion were considered valuable guests, and Ye Tian replies that he was just an ordinary bird and had no connection to prestigious families, so he didn't know how valuable he really could be. Ling agrees and explains that his value lies in his common birth and his independence, and Ye Tian thinks that Ling was actually a very calm person, unlike Yu, who was always cheerful and smiling all the time. Xiao offers the protagonist some tea when Ling continues talking, saying that her purpose in calling him to talk was only so that she could extend her invitation and invite him to join her commercial pavilion. He could practically see his sister talking to him now, but he also knew that he would never say no to a face like that, so the protagonist said that there was still one thing he didn't understand. Ye Tian said that Mahai was an extensive base and so its power was unlimited, and he was sure that extensive bases were never short of talent, not to mention that he himself was still only a novice martial warrior. Ling replied that extensive bases became more extensive not because they were running out of talents, but because they were always in need of them. The protagonist thought that it made sense and that it was really unexpected because although he looked like a little girl, his words encompassed the whole picture, which should be expected of someone from the base, but his sister Yu would never say those words. Xiao asks why Ye Tian was hesitating so much because it really was a great opportunity where even elite disciples from powerful families who want to join don't meet Ling's standards. The protagonist thought that she was right because it really was a great opportunity, but joining any organization would mean that he would be imprisoned, and if anyone found out about his special ability, he would certainly end up dying a horrible death. So, before he could find a way to deal with it, he had to try to be as independent as possible, and Ling asked him why he was hesitating so long to answer her. The protagonist thought it was very difficult to find an opportunity to explain his situation to her, and it was even more difficult to deny it to Ling's face like that, but she continued to insist on knowing the reason for his hesitation. Ye Tian replied that he could barely find a way to put it into words and could start using the rumor of the invasion of the Iron Fangs as an example, because that incident had caused a lot of unrest among powerful families, but thanks to that, he had been able to recover his peaceful days. The protagonist didn't want to become like them, nor did he want to serve people like them. Ling understood that in Ye Tian's eyes, she was like those other people, so she said that they could negotiate so that they could observe each other for a while before doing anything, and he didn't need to answer now because he had plenty of patience to wait. So Ye Tian leaves, reflecting on what martial artists were and what real talent was, and wonders if martial warriors who have talent still remember the founding missions of martial warriors. Martial warriors were supposed to exist to protect people, which makes him remember his past and wonder why they had to tolerate the oppression of some martial warriors in addition to the fear of beasts, and he realizes that he still didn't have a high enough position to deal with those problems. He still needed to get even stronger, and decided to start fusing the high-ranking cultivation talent he had copied earlier in order to go even further with his powers. Ye Tian returns home and is reunited with Yu, who runs to hug him. She comments that he seemed much stronger after being away for 20 days, and he tells her that he has become a martial warrior, which makes her surprised and happy that their family now has a martial warrior. Ye Tian watched his sister celebrate and thought that it was silly to think about it because when Yu's powers awakened, she would also become a martial warrior and would also want to help her continue to increase her talent when she came across compatible items. At the moment, her status was that she had an intermediate rank in cultivation and a dormant low rank in her eyes talent. Yu approaches and tells Ye Tian to let her take care of his hair and style. After all, his hair was a mess and he looked like a beggar, and since he was now a martial warrior, he should take care of himself even more than before. So she holds him back and tells him to be quiet, and he just agrees to let his sister take care of the usual haircut. She agrees because it turned out to be the only cut she knew how to do anyway. Ye Tian thought that time really did pass quickly because in fact Yu had always cut his hair ever since his parents died, but things had remained that way ever since. At the time, as children, Yu was afraid to cut his hair and even asked if they couldn't just go to the hospital to let them take care of it, and he replied that it was just a simple haircut and going to the hospital would require and cost money, and assured her that everything would be fine and asked her to help him cut his hair short and to treat the wound on his eye, which was enough. Yu was frustrated because things could have been different if he only had the immortal jellyfish skill, which left Ye Tian confused about the name of this skill, and she explained that it was about the story he had read to her the other day. The immortal jellyfish had the ability to heal, and when they were injured, they healed almost instantly, and Ye Tian replied that those stories were made up for stupid children to believe, and asked how she could still believe that kind of tale. But Yu insists that it was all true and that he was only telling the truth, and he just agrees with her and replies that he knew she was only worried about him and that when his talent awakens, he could gain a healing power. That way, he would never get hurt and could protect his sister even more. And coming back to the present, Yu slaps his brother and tells him to stop moving around like that because it would ruin his haircut. Ye Tian runs off and she complains, asking where he was going because he hadn't even finished his haircut, but the protagonist ran because he remembered the illustrated book of treasures he bought last time and looked for the immortal jellyfish inside it. When he found it, he read that the immortal jellyfish was a water-type beast with a healing talent and was located in the Lake of Death, and you followed it asking what exactly he was looking for. That's because if he can copy the healing talent, then he wouldn't need to be afraid of getting hurt in the future, and so you wouldn't need to worry about him even more. You asks what he was reading and if that wasn't something only found in stories, and things like that were creations for foolish children, and Ye Tian replies that she was quite wrong because those stories were indeed true. Anyway, she decides to stop so she can cut his hair again. Later, after he had finished cutting his hair, Ye Tian continued reading and thinking about how strong those body training technique that only martial warriors could practice should be. He decides to start by training a new cultivation technique from the books he bought, and realizes that there's no way to even compare because his absorption rate in the past was much slower, and wonders what the effect would be if he took a bottle of intermediate beast blood right now. After taking it, he is impressed because his absorption rate has practically tripled, and now he could start cultivating at home, and when the recharge time was up, he could go out and go to the Lake of Death so that he could meet the immortal jellyfish and copy her healing talent. Returning to the shopping pavilion, Ye Tian meets Xiao again and she recognizes the protagonist as the martial warrior who was there the other time. Xiao says that he must have been there to look for Ling, and Ye Tian replies that he was there to buy something. Xiao realized that clothes really do change men because he looked much more handsome now than before, and said that he could go on if he wanted to buy something. Ye Tian asks if they have a map of the Lake of Death, and she agrees and goes off to look for it before coming back and giving it to him. The protagonist realizes that this is exactly what he needed and realizes that he could definitely copy good talents from there. Ye Tian asks how much it costs, and she replies that it's 100,000, so he pays without even thinking twice, making Xiao curious because it looked like he was going somewhere new, and she wonders if he's going to be collecting garbage again. Still, she remembered that Ling had said the other day that the Lake of Death was full of terrible aquatic beasts, and even elite martial warriors had trouble surviving in that place, so she hoped that nothing would happen to him. Ye Tian made his way to the Lake of Death and realized that it was a really barren and troubled piece of land, but it should certainly be great for copying great talent there. It had been deserted for a long time, and the strange atmosphere there made it appear that danger could arise at any moment now. Suddenly, the protagonist realized that what looked like approaching beasts were nearby and decided to remain invisible and observe what was about to happen for the time being. Ye Tian activates his shadow talent and observes from a distance, wondering what exactly that big glow was. Then then realizes that there were two people there, and they were a man and a girl whom the protagonist immediately recognizes as Ling. The two of them were facing an aquatic beast and ended up having to move away because they couldn't reach their goal. It turned out to be a super powerful maximum rank beast. Ye Tian was shocked by the scene, and the man sent Ling away saying he would hold the beast first, but to his surprise there were several other beasts nearby besides the top ranked one. They began to chase Ling, and Ye Tian realized that they were in real trouble, leaving him no choice but to help them. Ling started desperately running away from the beasts that were chasing her, and the man even shouted at her to be very careful when she had to jump to dodge their attacks. Soon, she activated her secret technique to start fighting the beasts, killing them with her skills and leaving Ye Tian impressed and wondering what exactly those secret arts were and how they could be so strong. The protagonist thinks he was really careless because that wasn't a fight that a novice martial warrior like him could get involved in, but in fact Ling was an elite martial warrior at the top of the realm. She manages to kill several beasts, and Ye Tian realizes that after activating her secret technique, her power became similar to that of a great warrior, and it seemed that not even 10 of Ye Tian's would be enough to defeat a strong person like Ling. In the middle of the battle, the man suffered a nasty wound to his leg and shouted for Ling to run away because the secret technique wouldn't last much longer, and now the most important thing was to keep the items safe. If they couldn't get out of there, the sacrifices of their brothers who dived in would be for nothing, which made Ling frustrated. Ye Tian was surprised that 10 people had apparently died underwater and wondered what kind of treasure it was that they had to go through so much trouble just to get it. Finally, Ling's secret skill runs out of time and she falls to the ground, knocking over the treasure as well. But Ye Tian appeared in front of her, even though Ling couldn't recognize the person standing in front of her. The protagonist wonders what kind of treasure it was that they were sacrificing their lives for and picks up the box, but Ling tells him not to take it, and the protagonist tells her to stop grumbling because he didn't mean to steal it. Ye Tian carries Ling and suggests that it would be safer to find a cave so they can hide now, and if she doesn't answer, he'll just take it as an agreement anyway. So he ran away with Ling, taking the time to take a closer look at her and realizing that Ling really was identical to her sister Yu, except for the black dot on her face. Ye Tian touches the dot on her face and realizes that it wasn't a lie but the real thing, but he's a little worried because Ling still hasn't woken up after fainting. Suddenly, she finally wakes up and is surprised to see that it was Ye Tian who had saved her life. The protagonist replies that he just happened to be passing by, leaving her surprised that he dared to go all the way to the Lake of Death on his own, which was impressive, and also realizing that he had almost managed to recruit such a talent for the martial pavilion. Ling picks up a stone of light and says that this stone could store and radiate light and could be said to be like a lamp, but Ye Tian asks how she was able to make such a stone suddenly appear, and she realizes that he seemed quite interested in it. Ling replied that she would talk about it after drinking some of the healing potion, which left Ye Tian wondering if what she had was some kind of special talent, but among her talents there was no special one like that. Later, after Ling has healed, she decides to tell him where all those items came from, then shows him the bronze chest and also a bag in her hands, and then puts that large chest into her bag. Thus, Ye Tian understands that it wasn't a space talent, but a type of space-type artifact, and she agrees, asking him if he liked it and would like to learn how to use it. She suggests that if he joins the martial pavilion, she could take him to the main base and make it possible, but he ignores her, saying that he was tired and would go to sleep, leaving Ling frustrated and still wanting to make an effort to hire Ye Tian for her pavilion someday. The protagonist thought it was just a simple space bag and a healing potion, and when you copy a space talent and a healing talent, those items wouldn't be of any use. But the problem was that Ling had just made a mess of things in the Lake of Death, so things wouldn't be calm anytime soon. But soon Ye Tian was asleep until the next morning. He wakes up and realizes that Ling has left, but has left behind what looks like a box. He is surprised to see that inside the box was a medium-rank profound training manual, 10 bottles of blood from high-ranked monsters, and 10 gold cards worth $1 million each, wondering if Ling left this for him and thinking that he was very grateful for it. Those items are enough to help him become an elite martial warrior, and in this case, Ye Tian now had a change of plan. He decided to look for the immortal jellyfish after becoming an elite martial warrior. 4 months had passed since then, and Ye Tian was still training and cultivating every day, finally reaching the realm of the elite martial warrior and being surprised by the true power that came from this new point of power. Now he could go out and start his hunt again, ready to continue his mission. Outside, he finds 11 new graves and realizes that Ling should have done this, considering the amount of beasts in the lake. Ye Tian thinks that not even their bones should have been left to bury. Ling made these graves before she left, which makes him think that she was a kind person, and he remembers that they should have been using an umbrella to be able to dive before and decides to take that umbrella, wondering if it was still working by now. Ye Tian realized that it was an umbrella that created a waterproof bubble, and it was a really good item. now being able to enter the water without any problems, and in addition the umbrella allowed Ye Tian to get faster when he was submerged. The protagonist activated his shadow talent and received a status notification about a species called a tiger clawfish with a medium rank innate talent, and realized that it was because a medium rank beast was approaching underneath him. Ye Tian narrowly dodged and sighed with relief and almost shocked, because for much less he would have been seen by that beast. He continued down until he reached what seemed to be the deepest part of the lake and wondered if there really were immortal jellyfish flitting down there. Suddenly, a tentacle hits his bubble and the system notifies him that the species was an immortal jellyfish with beginner rank innate talent and maximum level healing talent, surprising him because he really was able to find that beast. Ye Tian realizes that it has regenerated at a frightening speed, which was to be expected from a top-level healing talent, and so a fight between the two begins. The protagonist touches the jellyfish and successfully copies the maximum healing talent, being sent far away in the process, but luckily managing to take the talent he so desperately wanted to acquire. The living water attacks him and Ye Tian defends himself with the umbrella, but it ends up being destroyed, and so the ability to keep it waterproof ends too. Not only did this cause a big problem, but suddenly several notices of fish claws appeared in front of him, and he realized that there was a swarm of immortal jellyfish there. The protagonist had already obtained his talent and didn't need to worry about getting involved with those monsters, and now all that remained for him was to escape as quickly as possible. Ye Tian reached the surface of the lake and realized that he was still being followed by the insistent jellyfish, so he activated his speed talent at maximum strength to be able to dodge the attacks coming towards him, escaping to dry land. Ye Tian fell to the ground, relieved that he had finally managed to escape, and then decided to start fusing the healing talent with his own body. He began to feel the pain, but it seemed that he had copied so many talents so many times over time that his body had begun to get used to the pain. So he decides to return home to start adventuring with his new skills. The scene then cuts to Ye Tian meeting several other warriors who were being recruited by the Lin family and realizing that he would need to act very cautiously now. Lin Mingji arrives and he greets everyone for the start of the beast removal operation. Mingji was the current head of the Lin family and was at the top of the elite martial warrior level, but in addition to them, An from the Mo family was also there, and Ye Tian realized that he was meeting this troublesome family again. They began by saying that everyone knew that the Linhai base was too small and the resources were all limited, making it difficult to meet everyone's cultivation needs. Collaborating with a medium-sized base could bring incredible benefit, and that's why this operation was so important. Dealing with monsters was obviously dangerous work, but the reward in this operation would be more generous than any hunt they could have done before in their lives. Everyone celebrates the Lin family, and Ye Tian recognizes that even Captain Galewolf was among the warriors on site, and wonders if he would still recognize him and remember when they saw each other in the past. Mingji goes on to say that to put an end to everyone's doubts, he would guarantee right now that anything they acquired during this operation would be entirely the hunters, which makes the warriors all celebrate again. But that wasn't all, as the Lin family had also prepared another reward, and everyone in the martial warrior realm would receive 20 bottles of medium rank monster blood and 2 million coins. The elite warriors would receive 3 bottles of high rank monster blood and 10 million coins. So, Mingji tells everyone to go and register right now and expects everyone to come back full of money, and the warriors celebrate again. They lead everyone to form a line to place their hands on the assessment rock to analyze their strength. People started going to the stone one after the other, and Ye Tian thought that Ling was right, as he had no need to work for powerful families, especially for troublesome people from the Mo family. If they found out he was an elite warrior, they would cause unnecessary problems. This tool is based on detecting power, and if you put less power into it, a smaller kingdom should appear. The protagonist touches the rock and tries to control himself so that an advanced rank martial warrior appears, and everyone is surprised to see that he really is a powerful person even though he is very young and seems to be a genius from a powerful family. Ye Tian had only shown part of his strength and still managed to attract so much attention, and he realized that he should have shown less of his strength. Galewolf comments that true geniuses are always discovered at a young age and mentions that he himself was an old man who was still an advanced rank martial warrior, and all his companions were only medium rank martial warriors. One of the warriors mentions that they could call Ye Tian to their team because they were missing a member, and Galewolf asks why Ye Tian would choose them when he was at that stage of power and they would all want to recruit him too. But they are soon surprised when Ye Tian starts to approach them, and the protagonist greets Galewolf, saying that it's been a long time since he's seen him. Galewolf is shocked to realize that he was the martial apprentice who saved the little girl from the Silver Moon Wolf, and says it's unbelievable that Ye Tian has become an advanced rank martial warrior in just 1 year, and the protagonist replies that he was just very lucky. Ye Tian asks if he could join Galewolf's team during the operation mission, and the captain immediately agrees, leaving the protagonist very grateful for the welcome. The archer says that it would be good to have another advanced rank martial warrior at their side, and so they all set off for the mission area. The map said that low rank monsters were appearing there, but just by chance Galewolf advises them to prioritize everyone's safety above anything else, and not to advance recklessly. Ye Tian says that some monsters are approaching and that they were very fast, so Galewolf tells everyone to calm down because he will deal with the ones in front while Ye Tian takes care of the ones behind, and the others will provide support when necessary. The battle begins and Ye Tian starts killing the monster wolves with ease, making Galewolf clap his hands and praise him, laughing after saying that he was still one step behind him because Galewolf killed 3 while Ye Tian only killed 2. The archer said that Ye Tian was really strong and she was getting to like him more and more, and the other warrior said that he already had such a skill even though he was so young, and commented that his captain shouldn't act so cocky. Galewolf complains that he couldn't even celebrate and boast for once in his life. Then they start arguing about why the wolves hadn't waited to attack everyone in the valley because their chances of winning would have been greater that way. They considered that perhaps the wolves couldn't, and Galewolf said that this was no longer their territory as there were other powerful beasts in the area. Although the warriors were tense, they remembered that they had 3 intermediate and 2 advanced martial warriors, so there was no need to be afraid. Galewolf showed them that he had a walkie-talkie from the Lin family and told them that all the captains had been given one. When they were in danger, they could simply call for help, and so they could carry on without worrying. So everyone continues on their way until the captain tells everyone to stop because he heard something, and Ye Tian warns them that they were coming from above. The protagonist realizes that it was a flamethrower lizard with a novice rank innate talent and a low tank fire talent. The lizard fires a fire attack and they narrowly escape, so the other warriors decide to take care of it while Galewolf and Ye Tian watch. The captain mentions that judging by its aura, it was a low rank beast, and so everyone should be careful with its flames. Ye Tian asks if they would be okay acting like this, and the captain replies that it was just a low rank beast and that was fine. In the end, they win successfully, and the archer says that it was all thanks to her 2 companions because she didn't do much, and the warrior replies that if she hadn't distracted the beast with her arrows, they wouldn't have finished the battle so easily. They comment that it was a very weak low rank beast and easy to finish off, and a few more wouldn't be a problem, until suddenly a fire attack flies towards the warrior and Ye Tian quickly saves his life before being hit. Everyone was shocked because there must have been more beasts around, and it was probably the same type of lizard, and those fire monsters hadn't arrived yet. Galewolf calls for help over the walkie-talkie that the C-Zone team was in danger and was asking for support, but soon realizes that they were ignoring them on purpose. The warrior says that it seemed his captain had overestimated the Lin family because they didn't care a bit about their lives, leaving Galewolf frustrated. He says that he thought he had followed the right people this time and that he could get along with them, but he couldn't imagine that the Lin family were such traitors too. He breaks the walkie-talkie and says that the Lin base was rotten to the core, saying that he would hold off the monsters and everyone else should leave immediately. The warriors are worried because they wouldn't leave their captain alone and would all leave together, but Galewolf tells them to follow his orders. One of the warriors quickly runs for his life without a second thought, which make the others realize that the newcomers really were cowards on that level, and the other warrior almost wanted to kill him for it if he survived after that moment. Galewolf told Ye Tian that he was very talented and it would be a shame to die there, and told him to take his companions and run. The warriors almost forgot that Ye Tian was also young and therefore had to flee quickly because he couldn't put his bright future at risk in that place. The protagonist agreed that he would indeed run, but it would be forward, and the aura emanating from Ye Tian shocked everyone because he really did have the power of an elite martial warrior. The protagonist didn't want to reveal his strength just yet, but if he didn't, the Galewolf team would be wiped out. With the Galewolf captain's skills, it would be very easy for him to escape, but he preferred to stay behind alone to let his companions escape. Knowing this, it would be very horrible of Ye Tian to just hide his strength at a time like this, and he wondered if there would be any difference between the damned Mo family and Ye Tian if he made such a selfish decision and didn't fight the monsters with his bare hands. The risks of revealing his true strength was something he didn't have time to think about now, as he believed that Captain Galewolf wouldn't get him into trouble. So Ye Tian continued killing the monsters and leading the warriors, impressed by the true power of an elite martial warrior like him. Galewolf thought that he was very strong indeed, and there was no doubt that his strength was among the best in the entire Linhai base. Suddenly, the warrior who had run away began to be surrounded by some monsters and called for help, and the warriors realized what was happening in the distance. Galewolf told them to ignore him because it was ridiculous that he had believed that he could run away on his own, and finally Ye Tian finished his work, saying that the road ahead was clear and he would continue now. He asked if they intended to accompany him or would they stop now, and Galewolf replied that the team would continue together regardless regardless of what happened, which left the protagonist satisfied with his words. The archer tends to her fellow warrior's wound after he has been hurt, and Galewolf thanks Ye Tian for helping them get there. The protagonist says that it was alright and they could split up now because he's still on that path, which surprises the captain because he intended to continue further into that area even after everything. The warrior tells Galewolf that judging by the current situation, the smartest choice was to retreat now, and Ye Tian agrees because they could go back sooner and he himself would go later. The captain asked if everything was alright because, despite having so much strength, he was still worried, and Ye Tian confirmed that everything was fine. The captain insists on talking about it some more, and the warrior asks if they should follow Ye Tian, but Galewolf says no because although they would continue, they would only end up delaying Ye Tian. With that strength, he wouldn't need any help. Ye Tian thought that before he met even stronger families, and before he got into annoying situations, he needed to test how strong his healing talent really was. Ye Tian arrives at a place that stinks and wonders if he's arrived at the monster's nest, witnessing a sudden earthquake that was nothing more than a hand coming out from under the ground and attacking him, making him have to dodge the following attacks in order to survive. A gigantic beast appears from that hand, and Ye Tian says that it really was a giant snake, and it was perfect because he could use it as a guinea pig for his new healing talent, starting a battle against it. The protagonist receives a full blow and survives, being impressed by the Lizard King's splendid power, but his healing talent was still working perfectly. He decides that he could try to go to extremes and lets himself be hit by the beast's attacks, testing to see if he could be burnt to death beforehand or if the Lizard King would give in battle due to exhaustion from the attack. Ye Tian lunges at him and several explosions continue in the distance, making Galewolf and his warriors realize the powerful battle that has been going on in the distance for more than an hour. They wondered if Ye Tian was still alive, and Galewolf said he wasn't sure, but they couldn't intervene in a fight of that caliber. In the end, Ye Tian realized that he would win that endurance game with some ease, killing the Lizard King. That healing talent still consumed a lot of energy, and Ye Tian was feeling exhausted. Even so, it was an intermediate rank beast, and he decided that he would use its blood to help him recover, starting to cultivate again after killing the beast. Meanwhile, Galewolf and his companions realize that the fight is over, and soon someone starts approaching, and that someone is Ye Tian. The protagonist is confused because he had told them to go back before him, and the captain replies that although they couldn't help anything in their battle, they were still worried about Ye Tian, so they stayed there. He is worried that Ye Tian's clothes have been destroyed by the flames and asks if everything is alright, offering an extra pair of clothes for him to wear. Ye Tian thanks them and sighs as he realizes that they were really good people. The warriors wonder what they should do with the monsters that were left behind, and the captain says that they should listen to Ye Tian's opinion because it was all his credit that they had managed to kill those beasts. The protagonist replies that since they didn't leave and the beasts were scattered, they should take them all. Galewolf hesitates, and the archer says that he's never seen so many beasts together before, and the warrior says that the beasts didn't kill them, but if they came back they would tire them to death. Ye Tian says to forget about those little fish because they might catch the Lizard King first, and Galewolf asks if he intended to take those beasts back with them, and the protagonist denies it before leaving, leaving the captain confused as to where he was going this time. Ye Tian replied that he was going to the area of the powerful ants, and so set off again. This was because he had heard about how the most difficult mission of that beast extermination was inside an anthill of powerful ants. Although a single powerful ant was only a low-ranking beast, inside the anthill they were scattered everywhere, and it was difficult to escape by fighting alone, even for a great warrior. That's why Galewolf hoped that Ye Tian would stay safe and be extremely careful. But not only that, but when the protagonist arrived on the scene, he realized that all the strongest groups had gathered there. He found the Mo family and the Lin family, but there was still an old man he didn't know, and he wondered which family he was from. The old man quickly realized that he was being spied on and had Ye Tian captured, which left the protagonist wondering what the worst could happen because he would need to infiltrate the front forces eventually. He lets himself be caught, and the old man realizes that he was an elite martial warrior, asking who he was and why he was spying on them from afar. Ye Tian replies that he was a martial warrior from the Linhai base and heard that there was a big mission there and went to help, and the old man tells him to let him go. He asked which warrior family Ye Tian belonged to and why he wasn't with his family, and the men quickly replied that they didn't belong to any of their families. The old man says that since Ye Tian was an elite martial warrior at such a young age, it was something rare, but asks how nobody could recognize him anyway. The head of the Lin family, Mingji, approaches to discuss the matter with Elder Qing and says that he was part of his family. Ye Tian is confused because he was declared a member of the Lin as soon as he heard that he was elite, which was expected of the Lin chief because they wanted even picking up talents. Lin tells Ye Tian to return to his group, and the protagonist agrees, making Mingji happy because he got an elite warrior for free. Watching everything, Ling, Xiao asks how the Lin family could try to steal Ye Tian from them, and Ling replies that Ye Tian should only belong to the Martial Pavilion. Soon everyone began to make their way towards the large expedition for the area's main mission, and the protagonist thought that now that everyone knew he was an elite warrior, it seemed that he wouldn't be able to sneak around like he had done before. But with his current skills, he had nothing to fear. They soon realized that they have reached the ant's nest, and Qin says that everyone should retreat now, leaving the warriors confused as to what the old man intended to do now by going into the nest alone. Qin starts to use a formation on the ant's nest, and Xiao asks how he could do that given that it was a precious formation, and Ling replies that the Iron Tooth base had its plans, and one of those formations was enough to suppress the sea base, which was impressive to see. Everyone is shocked by the nest collapsing and that Qin's formation was powerful up to that point, wondering if the monsters have turned to ash too because they haven't even seen an ant so far. The protagonist is frustrated that no bodies have been left behind and wonders if they've all turned to ash, because if there aren't any corpses left, he won't be able to copy the skills. Ling says that Qin just messed things up with the formation, as it was as if they had stirred up the hornet's nest now. Suddenly a large hole appears and several powerful ants jump out of it, shocking the warriors because it was as if an army of them were coming out of the hole. Our story continues shortly after our protagonist has successfully copied the high rank strength talent, but he realizes that he won't be able to merge in that place, so it would be better to find a safer place than that. Ye Tian used his speed talent and took off, but halfway there he came across some ants, so he used his ghost killer skill to kill them. But beyond that, there was an absurd pressure being placed on the shoulders of all the warriors who were in the middle of the battle that made Qin soon realize that it must belong to that of a tall monster. And just as they had imagined, suddenly a powerful ant of high rank appears in the middle of the battlefield, and Qin guides everyone to retreat, and so the warriors all run off too in order to be safe. The warriors are almost frustrated because the heads of the wealthy families are quick to escape, but they all decide to retreat as well. Seeing all the warriors running away from the high-ranking ant, Ling says that they were a bunch of losers and it was time for them to go, and Xiao asks about Ye Tian. Ling replied that there was no need to worry because he would manage to escape one way or another. But first of all, you need to be subscribed to this channel so that you can receive notification of upcoming Manuka summary videos. So hit that subscribe button and let's continue with the video. Meanwhile, the warriors wondered if they didn't have a great martial warrior with them who was completely capable of fighting that monster, and wondered why it had escaped, and another replied that powerful ants possessed the talent of strength. The combat power of a high-ranking monster augmented by the talent of strength makes it a match for a great master, and it was obviously impossible to expect that a great martial warrior could do anything against them. After all, it was noticeable that among the great martial warriors of the Iron Fang base, Elder Qin was the first to tell everyone to back off and ran off, which made the warriors angry because they had all been tricked by the old man. Ye Tian thought that, just as he had imagined, he couldn't trust those people. The warriors continued to run and shout for help when they began to be overtaken by the ants, and some were even killed along the way. But in addition to that bizarre event, they all feel another even more powerful pressure approaching that make them unable to breathe properly. They also see Ye Tian passing like an arrow between them, so fast that they can barely see him. The protagonist knew that the mist belonged to some kind of suppressor, so he had to find a way out of there as quickly as possible. He knew that the golden ant would definitely keep an eye on the team, and it looked like it was time to get out of there. Ye Tian leaves the place completely and returns to where Galewolf's team did the job of cleaning up the monsters' bodies. He realizes that, as expected of the captain and his team, they were all professional hunters, dissecting the monsters so well that only the skeleton was left. So, Ye Tian decides to start casting his new high-ranking talent and begins to feel that great pain as usual. Faced with the big shots from the big families, having absolute power was the only way to contain them. Later, after completing his talent fusion, the protagonist decided it was time to return home. At home, he rests while thinking about how a high-rank strengthening talent was equivalent to a tenfold increase in his current strength. Although Ye Tian was still an elite warrior, killing a great martial warrior in his early stages would be super easy. Yu approaches when she realizes that her brother has finally returned and is frustrated because he was still sitting there meditating and cultivating all day, thinking that instead of answering her questions, he was pretending to be training there instead. After receiving no reply from her brother, she left angrily and filled the food with salt, telling him not to complain about anything afterwards. Later, she calls Ye Tian to eat when the food is ready, and he is surprised by the number of dishes she has prepared. Yu says that he's been working hard at work, so of course she'd work hard to prepare a big feast for her brother, and tells him that he can eat to his heart's content now. now. But before Ye Tian can devour the food, someone suddenly knocks on the door and Yu complains as he rushes out to answer it without even trying to take a bite of the food first. It was Captain Galewolf who appeared on his doorstep, leaving Ye Tian surprised. Ye Tian invites Galewolf in and asks the reason for his visit, and he replies that he's come to give him his share of their winnings because it turns out they've gotten a big reward from all the things they've collected. Ye Tian says that he doesn't really need it, and Galewolf insists that it would be unfair if he couldn't get his share too, forcing the protagonist to accept. The protagonist also says that he could stay to eat because he needs to ask him something, and Galewolf agrees to the offer, excited at seeing so much delicious food. Galewolf stuffs himself with Yu's food, saying that it's very good and it's been a long time since he last ate a homemade dish this tasty, and Ye Tian says that he could eat as much as he wants because he himself doesn't feel like eating right now. Yu asks if Galewolf didn't think it was a bit too salty, and he denies it because her food was very bland and it looked as if she had gone light on the salt, which leaves her a little shocked, but she lets him eat it as long as he wants to. Later, Galewolf asks Ye Tian what he wanted to ask, and he replies that he has been cultivating at home for the last few days but wasn't very up to date with the latest events, and asks what has been happening in the beast removal operation recently. Galewolf replies that from what he has heard, the Iron Fang base and the Linhai base have suffered heavy losses, as they have lost more than 50 elite martial warriors and have even lost 3 great martial warriors. Ye Tian is surprised and asks if all this happened in the nest of the mighty ants, and Galewolf agrees, telling him that when the first platoon of warriors retreated, they organized a bigger and better one, but still managed to fail again. What happened angered the ironclad base, and so they sent a grandmaster who finally cleared that anthill, which shocked Ye Tian and made him ask if that was the case, then the trade route should have been cleared. Galewolf agreed, but he didn't know what the ironclad base was trying to do and what it was worth paying such a high price for. Ye Tian escorts Galewolf out of the house even though he says it's fine because they see each other all the time, but the protagonist still makes a point of escorting him out to say goodbye. Suddenly, a man approaches Ye Tian and introduces himself as Mo Yuan, the Mo family butler, which puts the protagonist on his guard. Yuan says that he was ordered by the head of the family to invite him for a meal, and Ye Tian replies that he hasn't felt like leaving the house that much lately. Yuan comments that no one has ever dared to refuse an invitation from the Mo family before, and Galewolf quickly approaches him telling him to take it easy and not be so worried. But Yuan approaches and tells Ye Tian that he should accept the invitation obediently and know his place, but the threat doesn't make the protagonist very happy, and he quickly slips Yuan's hand off his shoulder and knocks him to the ground. Galewolf tells Ye Tian to stop it, but Yuan just runs off saying that he would kill him someday. Galewolf says that it's better to provoke a gentleman than a petty man, and Ye Tian replies that it's fine and there's nothing to worry about. Ye Tian thought about how impressive that high-rank strengthening talent was, as he barely used his strength and was able to break his arm in the blink of an eye. In parallel, Yuan was dying of rage after going through all that humiliation and was ready to make Ye Tian regret everything he had done. Back at the Mo family, Yuan comes running in front of the family patriarch and also Mo Sheng, the head of the family, telling him to avenge his humble servant. Sheng says that he sent him out to extend an invitation, not to kill, and asked what exactly happened. Yuan replies that he delivered the invitation, and when he met Ye Tian he was polite and respectful to him, but for some reason Ye Tian started ignoring him when he said he was from the Mo family. This left Sheng shocked, and Yuan went on to say that not only had he heard him, but he had also torn up the invitation he had given Ye Tian, even though Sheng had written it by hand. Sheng gives an angry shout that makes Yuan almost fly away, but not only that, the Mo elder is also angry about the whole situation. Sheng says that Yuan could leave now and hands the medicines to his father Chong to take first. Then Chong says that the battle against the powerful ants gave him no choice but to use a secret art to escape and to fight with everything he had, but unexpectedly he ended up injuring his core and therefore feared that he would never be able to heal it again. Sheng replied that his father couldn't be that pessimistic because things would get better, but Chong replied that he understood his own body better than anyone. When he died, the Mo family would no longer have a great warrior to take care of the family, and that would be a devastating catastrophe. Sheng wonders if it's possible that Ye Tian was waiting for the Lin family's invitation, and Chong agrees because they would need to find a way to beat the Lin family in the meantime. After all, since they hadn't been able to invite him politely, they would have had to take him by force somehow. But in the end, Ye Tian's surname would always be Yi, and he would still be an outsider, and even if they brought him into the Mo household, there was no guarantee that he would actually serve. Chong replied that it could be done with the bottle of elixir, because that elixir could take away the individual's free will. He had planned to use it during the banquet, but it seemed that they would need to use it first. He handed it to Sheng and told him that he should guard it very well, and told him how it could be used to remove his free will first, then brainwash him and give him a new identity. They could say that Ye Tian was his bastard son and then make him change his surname to Mo so that he could recognize his ancestors and return to his family. Sheng was shocked at the idea of being told he was a bastard son, and Chang told him that he shouldn't be so tense because no one would steal his position as the head of the family, and even though he was a bastard son, it didn't matter as long as he could use the surname Mo. Sheng replies that his father worried too much and only feared that it might affect his reputation. And Chang says that there really was no reason to waste time under any circumstances. Chang said to just make it happen, and Sheng replied that he was going to take 10 great elders with him to be able to carry out this plan, and using everyone at his disposal, he believed there would be no problem in capturing the weak Ye Tian. And so the men begin their mission, and one of them soon reports that he has successfully entered Ye Tian's house, hearing about the plan they were to follow, which was nothing more than capturing his sister to make him surrender. The other men said that they would be outside so that they could board him up if anything happened and only needed to be told if anything changed. The man walks around the house and announces that he has found his target, but to the surprise of the man who was caught off guard, the one waiting on the bed was none other than Ye Tian himself, saying that they took their time. The other men outside asked if he had managed to capture you and if he could answer their question instead of remaining silent all this time. But Ye Tian had already killed the man by hanging him while those outside waited for any answer, and the protagonist himself answered the questions by saying that he had captured him and didn't need to worry because he was going to return him. Ye Tian threw the man's body out of the window and the others ran to see what had happened, soon realizing that he was no longer breathing. The men were alert because Ye Tian might have asked for help so that he could get rid of them, but it was obvious that nothing like that had happened, because in that giant line base, no one would dare challenge the Mo family apart from them. But it wasn't long before Ye Tian himself went to the men to kill them too, getting rid of 2 of them quite easily. They all think that Ye Tian should have hired a shadow assassin to get rid of him and quickly decide to spread out, but the protagonist uses his talent for speed to keep up with them. They are shocked and wonder what exactly happened to make him reach such speed, and it doesn't take long for them to realize that it wasn't a shadow assassin, but Ye Tian himself who was fighting them. The men organize themselves to run up to Ye Tian and kill him, and the protagonist soon activates his strength talent to hold off the men's attack, leaving them shocked that Ye Tian was able to receive their combined attack at once. Ye Tian takes on all the men with ease using almost all his talents, leaving the survivors at a loss to understand how he was so strong when he was supposed to be just an elite martial warrior to begin with. Among the men who were sent on the mission, Ye Tian recognizes one of them as Xiaobei's father, and he claims that he was indeed Xiaobei's father and says that if they can't kill each other, at least they should resolve those issues in good time. Ye Tian tells him a secret and says that it was he himself who killed his son, Xiaobei, and En replies that it was alright and that he didn't care, because surely his foolish son must have offended him and his death was nothing less than deserved, and said he had plenty of money and if he saved it, he could offer as much as he wanted, but the protagonist couldn't care less about money and slammed En to the ground as well. Ye Tian would never leave revenge until the next day. After all, he was the one who tried to go there to hurt his sister Yu, so he would obliterate his entire family. At the same time, Chan wonders why the 10 elders haven't returned yet, and Sheng replies that his father doesn't need to worry because in the Linhai base, nothing is impossible for the 10 great elders. Suddenly, a huge explosion erupted in the room where they were, and Chang asked who had dared to barge in and ambush them, and who showed up was none other than Ye Tian, who said that even after they had sent people to kill him, it was still surprising that they were wondering who it was that had shown up to take revenge. Sheng was shocked to see Ye Tian and asked what he was doing there and where the 10 elders were, and the protagonist replied that it was alright because he could meet them again soon in hell, making Sheng furious. Ye Tian lunges at Sheng and hits him with his sword, causing Chang to run to his son, worried for his life. He was furious to see what had been done to his son, and Ye Tian recognized Chang's secret art, saying that he had seen him use it before to escape the ants, but Chang was furious that Ye Tian had dared to kill his son, and now he was ready to kill him in return. Chang lunges at Ye Tian and hits him with a punch to the face that sends the protagonist flying away. Chang tells Ye Tian to prepare for his own death because not even his ashes will diminish his hatred. Several subordinates rush to the scene when they realize that an assassin has broken into the house and they should take care to protect the patriarch of the family, which makes Ye Tian laugh because they've only just become alert now that he's already killed the head of the family, which really make the Mo family full of idiots. Chang says that everyone should kill him right now, and all the subordinates rush at the protagonist without even hesitating, but Ye Tian rushes at Chang without thinking twice either. Although the other men keep trying to hit the protagonist, he quickly sends them away, leaving them at a loss to understand how this could be possible. Chang wonders how he could have the combat skills of a great warrior, and Ye Tian says that they should try to find out how long his secret art should last. Chang clashed his sword with Ye Tian, causing causing a huge explosion in the mansion. Outside, some people were watching the chaos unfolding in the battle, and one of them commented that the skill of the great warrior who was involved in the fight was impressive. One of them asks if he should come closer to take a look at the situation, and the other replies to the first, the elder Zay, not to be so impatient and for now they should just sit and wait to see how things develop. The battle between Ye Tian and Chang continues to rage inside the Mo house, and Chang was impressed by Ye Tian's speed, who managed to block his blow completely. Chang's attacks continue to hit and try to hit Ye Tian at any cost, but he quickly dodges. Chang realized that it wasn't possible to go on like this, and instead of just wasting energy, he should ask the Lin family for help while the secret arts weren't finished. Ye Tian says that he could keep attacking and asks if that's all he has to offer, but to his surprise old Chang uses a smoke bomb and soon realizes that the old man must be trying to escape. Despite his attempt, Chang soon realizes that Ye Tian really was a difficult guy to lose, and the protagonist catches up with him, asking where he thought he was going. Chang gets frustrated and realizes that on top of everything else, Ye Tian had a great talent for high-rank speed, but he still keeps trying to quickly escape from Ye Tian's hand. Chang realized that the secret arts wouldn't last much longer, and he soon fell to the ground after running around. He realizes that this seems to be the complete end of the Mo family, and Ye Tian agrees because they will all be reunited in hell after this. Chang then starts begging Ye Tian for his life, and claims that he could give him the most valuable treasures they had. The protagonist realized that the conversation sounded strangely familiar and said that he could then show him what he had to offer, but what Chang handed the protagonist was nothing more than a sphere that fired several attacks in his direction, but which Ye Tian managed to use to defend himself in time. He realizes that, as expected of the Mo family, all the family members only knew how to play dirty until the end, but the truth was that the blade attack that ended up hitting Ye Tian narrowly actually had a lethal poison in them, and Chang laughs wondering who it was that was going to hell now. And in the end, Ye Tian would still be killed by Chang's hands, but the protagonist uses his healing talent and recovers, which leaves Chang shocked and wondering how he managed to have so many talents, but Ye Tian just finishes him off with a final attack, saying that he could receive the answer to his question to the god of hell when he died. Meanwhile, Wolf was wondering why Ye Tian hadn't come back yet and realized that she was almost feeling like his nanny for worrying like that. To his surprise, Ye Tian returned just then, and he thanked him for looking after his sister Yu in the meantime, and Wolf ran up to him to ask if he had finished what he had left to do. The protagonist agrees and says that as of today, the Linhai base would no longer have a Mo family, and Wolf sighs because it was a really cruel speech. Ye Tian asked where he was and if none of the assassins had managed to track her down, and Wolf replies that it was a safe place and she was resting now because she had been given a tranquilizer, which makes the protagonist relieved to see that she was alright. Wolf says that they should go down now because the roof was freezing, and Ye Tian agrees. On the way, Wolf asks what Ye Tian's next plans are now that the Mo family is gone, and the protagonist replies that he would like to get you to start farming. He says that he was still wondering if there was a way for normal people to get better quickly, and Wolf laughs saying that there was nothing like that, because you could only get better if you were willing to spend money to buy resources, and that's what people from big families did. Ye Tian asks if it was that simple, and Wolf says that first he should go and take a look at you because she was in bed on the second floor, and he arrives to find her resting in bed. When he wakes up, she jumps up to hug him saying that she was too scared that he wouldn't come back, and Ye Tian says that he will always be there for her and promises it. The next day, news spreads that the Mo family has been murdered, and everyone wonders how powerful a person would have to be for something like this to have happened. The Lin's young master, Mingji, and the great warrior Zay approach during the confusion, and Xiao also tells Ling about the Lin family's arrival. Mingji never expected that the patriarch of the Mo family would meet such an end, and he also found the Mo family's secret weapon, their clan treasure, the Iron Pearl. This was a sinister weapon that could make the holder emerge as the victor in a difficult situation, as the pearl had a far-reaching attack that could inflict lethal damage, being used in unexpected situations, and not even a great warrior could avoid such an attack. But the Mo assassin not only escaped, he even managed to kill Chang, who was wearing that pearl, and used it during the battle. According to the survivors, there was only one person, so at the very least the assassin's strength was that of someone at the highest level of a great warrior, but they feared that someone with such skill might not be from the Linhai base. Zay asked if the Ironbound base could have done this to the Mo family as a show of power, and Mingji says that his theory could make sense as he has thought of something similar. Mingji says that when the Ironbound base suggested establishing a trade route, one of the spies informed them that near the Ironbound base there is a great monster that will soon evolve into a king. The Ironbound base would face an enemy that would threaten its existence, and Zay asked if this meant that the well-known trade route was just a sort of immigration route for them. Mingji says that he believes believed that to be the case because when the two bases merge, the new and old powers would split into two factions and the Lin family would no longer be able to represent the Lin family itself, as the old faction would be their leader. Ming says that they should take advantage of the Iron Fang base's demonstration of power, and surely Zay should know what to do now. Zay agrees and says that he should personally deliver a letter to all the big families, inviting them to use the Mo family's resources. At the same time, Ye Tian showed Gale Wolf, who was totally shocked, the large quantity of elixirs he had obtained. Gale Wolf says that those elixirs must have cost more than his entire mansion, which was quite a find, and you ask if those elixirs were for real, and that Ye Tian must be going crazy to want to use them, and tells him to give them back right now. She says that he's finally managed to scrape together the money for a wife, so he shouldn't waste it on things that people have surely cheated him out of by selling them. Ye Tian replies that he could guarantee that the elixirs were real because they were all very valuable and gives you a taste of one, surprising her because it was really very good. Later, Ye Tian decided to leave to start a new journey because he was leaving for the Forest of 1,000 Leaves where he needed to get a certain item. This was because as the threat from the monsters grew, the ironclad base was sending more and more people to the Linhai base. The two grandmasters wouldn't be able to hold off the monsters for much longer, and getting stronger was the top priority now. That's why Ye Tian needed to keep training so that he could get even stronger before their defense failed. Yu was hurt that he had barely arrived to stay at home and would be leaving again, and asked if he couldn't just stay, and Ye Tian replied that she could rest assured that everything would be fine. He tells her that he wants her to focus on learning Captain Gale Wolf's body training technique and to take the elixirs and cultivate properly, and Yu agrees, asking him to take care of himself during the trip because she'll still be waiting for him at home. Ye Tian said that he would leave Yu in Gale Wolf's hands, and the captain said that he could leave her in his hands because his sister was also his sister. Suddenly, Gale Wolf realizes that people from the Ironbound base were arriving in large numbers who had shown up in order to cause a bit of tension in the Linhai base. That was the Sun family's convoy. Ye Tian analyzes the man on the motorcycle, Feng, and discovers that he had a high cultivation talent and an intermediate talent with the sword, thus having very impressive statuses. The protagonist feels that he's getting a bad feeling about all this, but he says that he'll be leaving anyway and that they should get home soon too. Yu hopes that Ye Tian will be okay to see him go, and so he sets off on his journey to the Forest of 1,000 Leaves. There, he realized that it was a very barren area and also found what looked like a black wolf panther's footprint, thinking that if he found it, he could improve his speed talent even more. Suddenly, Ye Tian felt a fluctuation of powerful elemental force, and it seemed that there must be monsters fighting nearby, so he decided to get closer to have a look. He soon found two monsters fighting, which were nothing more than golden dragon panthers facing off against another huge monster. The panthers were a rare mutant species, even more powerful than a black wolf panther, and at their great speed, they must surely be an apex level speed talent. And that gorilla was a high-ranking monster with combat skills that should rival those of a great warrior. The two golden dragon panthers were mid-rank monsters. Despite possessing the apex speed talent, it should still be difficult for them to defeat the gorilla like that. Ye Tian wondered how he could gain the opportunity to copy their talent in the middle of such an intense fight, and was surprised when a cub suddenly appeared, but was even more surprised when a spiritual light appeared from the cub. The cub then says that it would like to offer its spiritual light to sign a master and servant contract with Ye Tian so that it can be his most loyal servant. The protagonist is confused because he was hearing a girl's voice talking about the cub and asks if it was him who was talking to that voice, and the cub agrees. Ye Tian asks why it recognized him as its master, and the cub replies that it detected a benevolent swift aura from him. The system shows the cub's status, and he was a golden dragon panther with an apex rank innate talent, a speed talent of the same rank, an intermediate rank endurance talent, and a novice rank healing talent. Ye Tian was impressed because he really did have several strong talents and was a divine beast. The cub begs him for mercy because his parents were in imminent danger now and his mother was pregnant and therefore needed help to save her parents. Finally, Ye Tian agrees with the cub and decides to call the cub Jean from now on, making it his first pet, which makes Jean grateful for Ye Tian's words and agreement. Ye Tian copies Jin's speed talent and he soon begins to fuse and says that if Jean liked him so much, it was only natural that he should lend his strength to help him. With his status upgraded, Ye Tian gets involved in the battle, aiming to find and attack the gorilla's weak point, which should be its eyes. Ye Tian hits the gorilla's weak spot and the two panthers growl at Ye Tian, making him tell Jean that his mother didn't like him very much and that he could tell her he wasn't an enemy. Jean communicates with his mother and the protagonist offers Jin's mother a healing medicinal pill that she can use to prevent a miscarriage after that intense battle, and assures her that it was safe and there was no need to worry. Jean tells him that his father also asked for one of those medicines and Ye Tian offers it to the two panthers, making Jean thank his master for his help. But the gorilla was still alive and started to run away, seeming to want to escape, and soon the two panthers roared, and Ye Tian realized that they certainly weren't planning to let him escape so easily. The protagonist decided that they would go all the way. After all, there was no way that 3 apex speed talents couldn't defeat a high-rank beast. Jean said that there weren't 3, but 4, because he was also there learning to fight, and Ye Tian agreed with him because they were all going to go after the gorilla right now. Ye Tian was shocked by how great the apex rank speed was, and he still hadn't gotten used to the sensation, but it was still quite useful to be able to hit and dodge the gorilla's attack. Ye Tian activated his strength talent and unleashed his counter-strikes on the gorilla to knock it down, causing a huge explosion inside the forest. Despite this, the gorilla still hadn't died, which surprised the protagonist because the monster's body was very resistant. The panthers then set out to attack the gorilla too, finishing it off in one fell swoop. Jean asked if they had really won now, and Ye Tian agreed, which made the cub very happy. The protagonist thinks that he never imagined that he would fight alongside a beast one day, but his smile quickly fades when the female panther falls to the ground injured, and Jean runs to his mother to see if she is alright. Ye Tian says that the impact of the battle must have been too much for her, but fortunately he always used to carry healing potions for such moments, and the time has come to use them. Ye Tian hands the potion to the panther and says that it would make her feel refreshed, and Jean thanks him again because his mother said she was feeling much better now, which makes the protagonist smile in relief. But then Jean tells his master to be careful because several black wolf panthers were approaching, and it seems that it was they who lured the gorilla to the golden panther family, and Ye Tian says that from the posture of the black panthers, it seemed that they wanted to replace their parents so that they could become the new rulers of that forest. But this was something he couldn't allow to happen, and so Ye Tian went to attack the black panthers so that he could start a new battle, this time against them. After knocking one of them down, the others start to retreat, so Ye Tian holds Jean in his hands and lifts him into the air, saying that from now on he would become the new ruler of the forest, which ends the clash. Later, Ye Tian tells the female panther that she was still recovering and so couldn't keep walking and struggling like that, and Jean tells her that his mother mentioned not having any problems because she wanted to thank him for all his help. They continue walking for a while, and Ye Tian asks if they've arrived yet, and Jean says that there's very little to go as he's just ahead in the cave, and as they enter the cave, the protagonist finds what looks like a spiritual herb. Jean said that it was a gift from his mother, but she said it would take 30 days to ripen, and Ye Tian would have to wait a while before he could harvest it. The protagonist is curious to know what its effect will be when it blooms, until the scene cuts completely to the moment when the female panther has started giving birth to her cubs. A month passes with Ye Tian living next to the golden panthers, and he smells a good aroma coming from the spirit grass, as if it had finally finished ripening. He picks it, and Jean tells him to eat it soon, which makes the protagonist laugh because the cub was really impatient. Ye Tian eats the spirit grass and falls to the ground, leaving Jean shocked by the scene. When the protagonist woke up again, he had a severe headache, but it seemed that he had obtained a mental ability. This was a skill that only martial warriors could use, but he was still curious to know if he could use it even though he was only an elite martial warrior. Ye Tian was astonished to see that his detection range had increased to 50 meters, and in addition he could now copy talents in the distance, so he saw that he could fuse the intermediate resistance talent. But Ye Tian refused to do so because such a talent wasn't that useful, and he needed to prioritize his cultivation talent now. But now it seemed like it was time for him to go home because he had achieved a lot of good things that time. Ye Tian realized that he would have to part with the panthers now, but thanked the pair of panthers for all their help during that time. Jean comes running and says that he also wanted to accompany him and didn't want to be far from him, which makes the protagonist agree, saying that he would introduce him to a certain person who would surely like Jean. On the way, Jean comments that the world was really big and interesting, something he never had the chance to see before. Ye Tian said that the world was actually very dangerous, and just as they were talking about this, the protagonist noticed something strange and stopped walking when he saw that the 5th Academy had been completely destroyed, and there were several bodies scattered around the area. But not only that, but one of the people on the ground was Bao, Ye Tian's friend, and he rushed over to his friend to find out if he was alright and what had happened at the academy to put everyone in that situation. Ye Tian was relieved to see that Bao was alive and first gave him a vial of high-ranking monster blood so that he could see his friend recover. Then the protagonist discovers that the people who robbed Bao and the others were the warriors from the Ironbound base, and Bao tells him that the monsters destroyed the Ironbound base, and that's why 100,000 people escaped from the Linii base. Thieves started doing whatever they wanted and everything was in chaos. Ye Tian asked who was in charge of the base, and Bao replied that the Lin family was still in charge, but in reality they were all just puppets, which was just as he had imagined, as they had all managed to take over the base while Ye Tian was away for those 30 days. Meanwhile, Meanwhile, in parallel, you lost during her training to Galewolf, but the captain says that despite this she did well and that she was quite talented, and she replies that it was all because Galewolf had been teaching her so well. Suddenly, Ye Tian appears in the training hall and Yu is thrilled to see her brother after a long month apart, and she runs out to hug him with her usual excitement. Yu soon notices Jean and asks what his name is, and Ye Tian says it's Jean, causing his sister to snatch the little feline and run off in a matter of seconds. Galewolf approaches laughing and says that he certainly shouldn't have expected his sister to choose to pay more attention to the cat than to Ye Tian, which makes the protagonist laugh. Ye Tian thanked him for working with his sister and said that Yu was now a martial apprentice, and Galewolf welcomed him back before mentioning the invasion of the Ironbound base that had taken place while he was out of town. Ye Tian agrees that he heard about it and asks if anything happened at home too, and Galewolf says that he can rest assured because that place has always been very safe. He tells him that after Ye Tian left, a girl called Xiao showed up to deliver something and said that the Iron Tusk people would never dare hurt you after that. The protagonist realizes that it was a symbol of the Martial Pavilion and thinks that it was really nice of Xiao to think of giving him something to protect him. Galewolf says that there's no guarantee that it would work, but someone called Feng kept coming over to challenge Ye Tian to a duel to the death. The protagonist is shocked to hear this and thinks that he remembered this name because he checked out his talent at the city gates. Feng was known as one of the 4 great geniuses of the Iron Fang base, and after entering the city, he went on to challenge all the elite warriors he met and didn't lose even once. Galewolf warned that Ye Tian should be very careful because Feng was no joke, but instead of being worried, Ye Tian was excited to learn that Feng was interested in picking a fight with him. Suddenly, Ye Tian bumped into Feng, who was riding his motorcycle around the city, saying that he was finally back after so long away. Feng went straight to the point and told the protagonist to meet him in Minghui Square at 10 in the morning for a duel because they were going to bet on a bronze rank blade skill, and asked if Ye Tian had the courage to face it. Of course, the protagonist agreed without even thinking twice, gladly accepting the duel, and Feng said he would be waiting for him anxiously. In the meantime, Ye Tian took the opportunity to copy Feng's talent discreetly before seeing him off on his motorcycle. At this, Galewolf approached saying that this was very rash of him, as Sun Feng's strength was formidable and surely Ye Tian could lose this duel, but Ye Tian didn't think so at all. Ye Tian returned home and realized that since his cultivation talent was higher, he would try to pile one more on top of him, and so Ye Tian found himself looking forward to the next day's duel. The scene cut to the morning in Minghui Square where Feng was waiting for the protagonist at the Lin's Merit Monument. Despite Feng changing the location of the duel again, no one has been able to defeat him so far. People commented that the unlucky one this time was a guy called Ye Tian, a name they had never heard of before. Apparently he was still a child and they wondered why Feng wanted to duel a young man like him. His opponent wasn't the only unlucky one, and the Lin's Monument of Merit would also end up being destroyed. People commented that every time a duel took place, Feng used the opportunity to destroy some family's monument of merit, and he was certainly doing it on purpose. The Iron Base had been destroying the influence of the other families and had finally come to see the leader. Xiao asked Ling if she really thought Ye Tian would attend because she was getting a bit worried about him, and Ling replied that there was no need to worry because even if he couldn't defeat Feng, he could survive. In addition to them, Yu was also there, asking why there were so many people watching together. Galewolf says that every time Feng fights, it's a mess, and that's exactly the kind of influence he wanted. Yu asks how they could get any closer to the battlefield when there were so many people in front and suggests that they could go back because this duel seemed too dangerous. But Ye Tian puts his hand on his sister's head and says that it would be very quick to resolve this situation, and enters the battlefield, drawing the attention of everyone watching. The protagonist thanks him for waiting, and Feng replies that he didn't think he would show up. He shows him the bronze rank blade skill, the blade that was present and would be Ye Tian's if he won the battle. The protagonist also offers a bronze rank blade skill of the same level as the one Feng was offering and throws it together with Feng's, which makes Feng say that he was really quite arrogant to keep acting like that. Feng lunges at Ye Tian and Yu tells his brother to be careful, but Ye Tian easily dodges Feng's attack, surprising him with his great speed. Feng teases the protagonist when he continues to dodge and asks if his sign is a rat so that he can dodge without attacking properly. After dodging another slash that pulls out a few thin strands of Ye Tian's hair, the protagonist responds by punching Feng in the stomach, breaking his ribs and sending him flying away. People are shocked by the scene of someone sending Feng away with just one punch, and Ye Tian asks if he really looked like a rat now after receiving this blow. Feng stands up and says that he certainly knew how to use a few little tricks, but in this case it was just a sign for him to stop holding back. Feng fires a special multi-cut skill that the protagonist just deflects as if it were no big deal, destroying the Lin family monument in the process, which makes Ming furious to see that scene. Ye Tian Tian commented that he had narrowly managed to dodge, and it seemed that Feng also had some beautiful swords and interesting skills, but Feng was astonished that someone had managed to dodge his special attack so easily without so much as a scratch. The protagonist says that it was really worth dragging out this battle, and Feng wonders if he was really just playing with him and didn't really attack just because he wanted to find out about his sword skills. Ye Tian laughs at Feng and says that he never saw him as a real opponent and he wasn't even worthy of it, and it was all just for the sake of showing off his skills. This makes Feng furious again, and he lunges at Ye Tian ready to kill him, but the protagonist just punches his sword and breaks it into 2 pieces as if it were paper. He also grabs Feng's head and slams it into the ground hard enough to break it into several pieces, leaving everyone watching in complete shock. Ye Tian finishes by saying that as expected that was really annoying, and Xiao celebrates because as expected of Ye Tian he really was impressive. Ling smiles thinking that he was destined to join his martial pavilion one day and any resistance would be totally useless. Ye Tian goes to collect his reward for winning the duel and thinks that it must have been worth it because at least he got his new technique that came directly from Feng. Yu runs up to her brother praising him for his performance in battle and says that when they get back she'd like him to teach her to become as strong as him. Meanwhile, Zay tells Ming that Ye Tian won, but Ming replies that their family lost because the Lin Merit Monument is gone. Zay asks what they should do now and Ming replies that he doesn't need to protect him for the next few days and should stand guard for Ye Tian's sister because the Sun family certainly wouldn't let Feng's defeat go to waste like that. Back at Captain Galewolf's house, Ye Tian discovers to his surprise that Feng's sword skill could increase the strength of an attack by up to 6 times, and it certainly wasn't surprising that Feng's blow was that powerful. He analyzed his status and thought that he would still need a month before he could copy a new talent and completely forgot about it, which was a problem. Then, after the recharge time had passed, he could take Feng's fencing talent and add it to his status and skills window. Ye Tian decided that he would maximize his shadow assassin and stream cutting skills that he had picked up from Feng so that he would have the strength to face a master twice as strong and could finally be considered a true warrior. Meanwhile, Yu was training with great motivation after seeing her brother's duel with Feng. Galewolf thought that although the confrontation was over, according to the behavior of the families, it was certain that the Sun would try to take revenge on Ye Tian. He was worried about what they might do to Yu. After the training session, Yu realized that Galewolf was staring at her intensely and asked what the problem was. The captain calls her closer and hands her a necklace that he praised and said was very beautiful, and it was the necklace with the symbol of the martial pavilion. Galewolf told her that she should consider it an amulet of protection, so she should be careful not to lose it, and she thanked him and said that she would take good care of it. Suddenly, the archer from Galewolf's team comes running up and he asks her if they found out anything about the Sun family, and the archer replies that the Sun family members were looking for stores everywhere to buy property. Galewolf was surprised and realized that apparently the Sun family was still holding back and wouldn't become violent until they had stabilized. A month passes and Ye Tian is walking down the street when he notices a man in disguise. The man was surprised that Ye Tian seemed to be trying to read his mind using his spiritual power. The man wonders how Ye Tian learned to use spiritual power when only great martial artists could use such an ability, and the protagonist just thinks that the Lin family must have a lot of money to spend if they could send a martial artist to keep an eye on him in the meantime. In the martial artists market, it had been a month since Galewolf's team found out about the Sun family's information. In order to guarantee the purity of the lineage of fencing talent, the Sun family did not hesitate to marry close relatives for several generations. If they had a child with a mental or physical disability, they would secretly kill him or her, which made that family totally crazy and sick. In the Sun family store, Feng was presenting the store that was just starting to open at a discount. Some men congratulated Feng and hoped that he would be very successful from then on with his sales, and Ye Tian was observing the negotiations from a distance. Feng, whose cultivation talent was high and his fencing talent at its peak, began to be shot at by Ye Tian. Later, the protagonist left so that he could go to the cemetery to visit his parents and leave a flower for them in tribute, telling them that he had decided to leave the Linhai base to take you to a better base than the one he was in now, and had just decided to stop by to see them one last time and let them see how much he had grown. Suddenly, someone appears behind Ye Tian and the two immediately start a battle. The man who attacked the protagonist says that for Ye Tian to be able to defeat Feng, he must have some special ability, and the protagonist says that he must be the Sun family dog and that he's been waiting for him for a long time. After exchanging a few blows, they walk away and the man says that if he had killed Ye Tian after that battle, people would spread troublesome rumors, and so the protagonist should thank him for letting him live for a long month. The two battled again and exchanged several powerful and fast attacks inside the cemetery, which ended up causing the bouquet of flowers that Ye Tian had bought to fly away. The man introduced himself as Feng's master and that the two of them were were like father and son, and if Ye Tian hurt Feng, then he should die, especially since they were in an appropriate place like a cemetery, and so it was appropriate to make Ye Tian lose his life right now. The protagonist takes the bouquet of flowers and puts it back on his parents' grave, still listening to Feng's master speak. The man says that if Ye Tian kneels down and begs him, perhaps he would show mercy, and then he could open his parents' tomb and place Ye Tian's body with his son's. He remembers that Ye Tian had a younger sister. He remembered that Ye Tian had a younger sister and said that he could rest assured that they would all be reunited on the other side of life very soon, which made the protagonist furious at the man's provocation. Ye Tian used his advanced level speed talent and charged at Feng's master, grabbing him and throwing him to the other side of the cemetery, sending him flying even further away so that they would be far enough away from the cemetery not to destroy anything in the surrounding area. The man almost lost consciousness with the violence of the movement he received and realized that Ye Tian was really nothing more than a warrior at the level of a grandmaster. After finishing off Feng's master, the protagonist took from him the skill called the Shadow of the Sword, which seemed to be a very powerful and useful sword technique. His weapon was also much better than the one Ye Tian had before, and now he decided to get it for himself. It was dusk, and the protagonist decided that he could leave and return home at once before you started complaining again, thus leaving the body of Feng's master behind in the middle of the forest.